Hello and welcome to episode 14 of the Journeymen, our special year in review episode for 2018. My name is Bobby Lowe. I'm here with my co-host,
Michael Pattison.
So the first thing to say about this episode is that, unlike our other episodes, it's going to be completely spoiler-free because we're not announcing up front what films we're going to be talking about. So I always am on tenterhooks listening to end-of-year episodes where people just suddenly start talking in detail about the latest TIFF premiere that mere mortals are not going to get to see for another year. So we're gonna keep everything spoiler-free this time. And we're going to divide the episode into 3 sections. The first section we're going to call Discoveries, and that's just going to be our 10 favourite films that we saw in 2018 that are not from 2018. So our 10 favourite older films that we saw for the first time this year. And then we're going to count down our top 10 favourite films of 2018 in the second segment, and then in the final segment we're going to talk about our top 10 most anticipated films of 2019.
I want to note here at the outset that due to my current critical preferences, I would personally rather keep this discussion fluid and meandering rather than structured and segmented as a countdown. That's partly, I think, because that's the way I'm feeling increasingly. But overall, I think, we're on to 14 episodes now of The Journeyman, but after we sort of go live with each episode and I listen back to it, I feel there's an increasing disconnect between what I say about a film, whether on the episode itself or later in prose form on Letterboxd, and the sort of numeric score that I, ascribe to a film. One is sort of necessarily sort of, fluid, slippery, language-based, and the other is, even if it's given with an understanding of flexibility or ephemerality or whatever, it still has a certain solidity to it that I want to avoid. So I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be given any scores on this episode.
Okay, I think it goes without saying that any of the films we're going to talk about on this episode have high scores anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Well, that comes to my second point. I struggled to find 10 films to enthuse about in the context of a end of year top 10, let's say, for this purpose of this episode. Obviously, as we progress and get towards the end or the top of our lists, I'm going to like those films more than the ones that I'm, front-loading. But, and I don't know if it's because, and I was thinking about this, I don't know if it's because we're consciously limiting ourselves to theatrical releases, because there are a few films that are due for release in 2019 that I've already seen.
I'm not limiting myself to theatrical releases, though. Some of mine are Netflix.
Well,
films.
Commercial releases, yeah,
right,
commercial
yeah,
releases.
okay.
Then. But even so, same applies. I find it more and more difficult year in, year out to do that, and more sort of tedious.
You sound like you're about to take another year off.
A year off watching movies?
I remember you took, it was 2016, was it? You took a year off watching any new films.
Yeah, but that was yeah.
And you went the other way this year. You got a Cineworld Unlimited card and saw everything.
I did.
until you burned yourself out about halfway through the year.
There's only so many fucking of those summer releases that you can watch.
What do you think has brought on this Doridian turn?
I think it was just having to, at the end of the year or in the last few weeks, with this episode in mind, having to sort of think about things in those terms, like comparing films that I liked, not with each other, but my emotional response to one film, comparing that to my emotional response to another film, and then trying to think of them in terms of well, okay, which one would I talk about, nearer to the end of the episode than others? I've seen a lot of films this year that I have enjoyed, but I enjoy more just sort of discussing them and working through my, response to them rather than creating some sort of list. I don't want to become one of those guys who I don't know. I don't want to become one of those guys who doesn't score films, but nevertheless still logs them. I'm even thinking about shock horror here. I'm thinking about withdrawing completely from publicly logging my viewing tallies on Letterboxd or otherwise.
Okay.
I was thinking about making that my 2019.
I can't relate to all this agonizing over something like this. You see a film, you like it, you give it 7, 8 out of 10, whatever.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. Like I feel like I'm sort of subconsciously as well, and this is another thing to agonize over. I don't give out high scores like you do, which will become very sort of, well, not maybe evident on this episode, because at least I'm not going to be giving out scores, but like, I feel like you're a lot more generous with new releases than I am, and I think that's something that I need to go away and think about. And
I think you come to new releases often with the weight of like a sort of contrarian impulse. If a film has been really, really well received by other critics,
I totally disagree. Yes, because a lot of these other critics I happen to know in real life, which is a burden. Yeah, often. But I think actually reflecting back on the year in terms of the podcast, doing this and formalizing an opinion in verbal form rather than penmanship, it's liberating, I find. And yeah, I think co-hosting this with yourself, this is a half disguised compliment coming up. So listen. It has helped free me up somewhat from those kinds of unconscious contrarian impulses, let's say.
Okay, good.
Okay.
All right. Will we proceed? I don't know whether you want to. We just cut the episode short here, or.
So, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and Happy New Year. All the best.
All right. Okay. Let's get into the first segment here, which will be. I would have thought you'd enjoy these segments being like rigidly timed and like a one of those structural films.
One of those structural films. Yeah.
But luckily the commercial release rule keeps off of all these lists.
Yes, at least a couple of these are going to make my discoveries of the year list.
Oh, yeah.
Firstly, when you put it to me that we were going to have these 3 sections for this episode, discoveries, the actual top 10, and then our most anticipated, I took discoveries to mean like a fucking single performance in an individual film, like a new actor that I wasn't aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, you can throw that content into the honourable mentions for the top 10 section, I guess.
Okay.
I actually find discoveries to be the hardest of these lists to put together, or not so much to put together, but to talk about, because throughout the year, if you asked me kind of like what are the best films of this year, I'd be able to rattle off a lot of titles off the top of my head. But if you were to ask me at any point in the year, what are some of the best films you saw for the first time this year that aren't from this year, I would really struggle to even think. Even when someone asks you what good films have you seen lately, I kind of draw a blank. So it's interesting to kind of look through your viewing log for the year and go, oh yeah, that was this year.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I do find it easier to position myself in relation to older films, like critically. I know how I feel about them more easily. And that's, I don't know. It's I guess the inevitable problem of sort of, processing the present moment, I suppose, and unraveling a film in that moment, if it was made in that moment. But yeah, I mean, you and I both keep fastidious viewing logs for the time being. And yeah, I mean, I was looking through the list, and okay, I said I wasn't going to score any films on this episode, but interestingly, I've given out 3 9s this year on first viewing. I have never given a 10 out of 10 on first viewing. 10 is like, because 10 for me is like an enduring favourite, which
Yeah,
requires at least, a couple of rewatches over time.
I can't officially cordon it off though, because that means that my rating system is out of 9, so it has to remain out of 10. So it has to be the possibility, but in practice, a 10 is sort of unreachable on a first view.
Yeah, you're still waiting for that, like, life-changing epiphany. But I think the older we get, the less that's going to happen. The less chances that's going to happen. But yeah, I've given 3 9s this year to new films, to new to me films, or discoveries as you would call them.
All 10 of mine are 9s.
Right,
but they're the only 10. They're the only 10 9s. So you're only listing 3.
No. So because I only had 3 9s, I didn't want to discriminate against any of the 8s.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to list all the fucking 8s as well, if that's okay.
Okay, so how many is that?
15.
Okay, so I've got 7 films just as honourable mentions that I just wanted to mention, as is the nature of an honourable mention.
Mm-hmm.
In chronological order, I have The Black Room, directed by Roy William Neill from 1935, the Boris Karloff. It's often classified as a horror film, but it's more like a gothic melodrama with kind of like this kind of horror, this kind of macabre kind of story lingering in the background, but it plays out more like a dark gothic melodrama. It's really, really good. Blind Beast by Yasuzo Masumura from 1969, the kind of, what would you call it, kind of, well, we actually talked about this on our former podcast, and that material will be re-released in due course, but sort of art house horror sort of thing, yeah. About a blind sculptor kidnaps a woman and brings her to his weird cavernous studio and wants to like create a masterpiece using her body as a model. 3 Days of the Condor by Sidney Pollack from 1975, which I think is really, really great. And I kind of didn't expect it to be like we've spoken about in relation to other spy films. I kind of didn't expect it, but it's the type of spy film that draws me in with like focusing. It's a bit Hitchcockian in the sense of like, this guy who doesn't know what's going on and he's in over his head and everybody's trying to catch him and kill him or whatever. So that's the kind of thing I do like. Q, also known as Q, the Winged Serpent by Larry Cohen from 1982, about a giant. Q stands for Quetzalcoatl, the Aztec god. So it's basically like a giant bird, like roosting in the Chrysler Building in Manhattan, and it's great. Flesh and Blood by Paul Verhoeven, medieval exploitation epic. We Own the Night by James Gray, which my impression is that's a little bit underrated. I thought it was great.
Yeah, it's a good film to watch, I think, if you have a brother, I suppose.
Okay.
Or brothers,
I guess. I didn't really think of that, but I
say that a friend of mine really loves that film, and he says he says primarily it's because of that, his primal sort of visceral emotional connection to it.
Okay. And my last honourable mention is from last year. It's 1922 by Zach Hilditch, the Stephen King adaptation that, along with Gerald's Game, which I saw last year, they're both produced for Netflix, and they were both kind of overshadowed by It. They all came out around the same time, I think. Mm-hmm. But they were both better than It. And I think 1922 is great psychological horror. About a farmer whose wife owns the farm and she wants to sell it. So he enlists his eldest son to help kill the wife, and they bury her body down a well, and then it's like how they deal with the kind of fallout of that. Okay, all right. Do you want to give me? You're not doing honourable mentions though, so.
Well, I'm not doing all of these are honourable, and all of these will be mentioned. But since I last spoke, I've added 2. So I now have like 17 films, as well as you having 17 films. Although 7 of yours are honourable mentions.
So what order do you want to just list off all 17 of yours?
I mean, I can do that, yeah. Or I can list the first 7 chronologically. Oldest first.
Whatever way you want. You're making up your own rules here.
Okay, I'll just reel them off then. Okay, so the oldest discovery I made this year is To Be or Not to Be by Ernst Lubitsch, 1942.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. That's very good.
You've seen that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I read and reviewed a book on Lubitsch a few years back, and that was spoken of extensively with regard to doubles and doppelgangers being a kind of innately comic form. And I think I've really wanted to watch the film since then. It's really great. Shane, George Stevens' 1953 Western.
I haven't seen that.
Alan Ladd, recommended. Very, very good. Another Western, 1957, Bud Buttigieg's The Tall T, which stars Randolph Scott, and I watched that and several other films by the director starring that star, because Indicator, the boutique, if we can call it that, the boutique Blu-ray and DVD distributor in the UK, released a box set of theirs, 5 westerns that they made together,
right.
which are all kind of recommended, sort of, they run for about 77 minutes each, and they're all very sort of
like B westerns.
Yeah, low budget and not sort of visionary in the way that a Fordian western might be, but they're great. They're really good.
I've seen the Simpsons parody of that film, the Tall T.
Oh, really?
Is there money buried under the Tall T?
Yes.
Yeah, that's in the Simpsons. Yeah.
A Man for All Seasons by Fred Zinnemann, 1966, which we recorded a segment on in our former incarnation, which, as you said, will be re-released in due course. Marketa Lazarova by František Vlachil.
Yeah, that's been on my to-watch list for a long time.
Which is like, I'm so pleased, because I had a really, really high gigabyte download of this on my hard drive for years, and I'm so pleased I waited, or was too lazy to watch it on a laptop or home screen, because I watched it at Karlovy Vary Film Festival earlier this year in the cinema, and that was like transportive from start to finish. I couldn't really tell you what it's about. It's sort of like incomprehensible.
How does it
immersive?
How does it compare to Hard to Be a God? Or
it's similar in feel, and it's sort of transportive qualities. And
because Hard to Be a God is a film that came close to getting a 10 on a first viewing for me. I actually deliberately went back to the cinema to see it like a week later or 2 weeks later, just so I could give it a 10.
Oh wow! Did you give Hard to Be a God a 10 then on a second viewing?
Yeah.
Oh right, okay, I didn't know that. Second one is Blind Beast, to repeat you. And then Zed.
Oh yeah, okay.
1969's political thriller by Costa Gavras, which I watched in conjunction with a few other films by him in preparation to write the liner notes for, again, another release by Indicator of Missing, his film with Jack Lemmon and Sissy Spacek, another political thriller. So kind of the genre in which he sort of made his name. The Towering Inferno, John Guillermin's 1974 disaster flick.
Yeah, great film, which we also covered on the former podcast.
That's true. Another former podcast segment coming up, California Split. By Robert Altman, 1974, which I thought was really, really great. And thinking back to it increasingly makes me want to cover Robert Altman on the Journeymen. Yeah,
I mean, I gave that a 7, but when I was going through my viewing log this year, I was like, that's an 8.
Yeah.
That's an 8.
Yeah, it stays with you, doesn't it?
It does. It's resonance.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier, my love of structural films. One belated catch-up this year was 11 by 14 by my man James Benning, which he made in 1977, and which I saw on, was it 35 or 16 mil? Anyway, I saw a new print of that at the Berlinale in February this year, and it was subsequently released by the Film Museum on DVD, which would I recommend it to you? Probably not, but I recommend to all of the listeners.
I think you might assume, given the nature of the films that we typically cover, that our other listeners would probably not enjoy that.
Well, I don't know. Maybe we shape our own listenership.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Another film that I saw at the Berlinale this year was Yama, Attack to Attack by Michio Sato and Kiyoshi Yamaoka, 1985, Japanese documentary. which is about worker struggles in Japan, but whose production was sort of overshadowed, and the film has since become mythologized because of the two directors being murdered during the making of the film by the Yakuza. So that was good. Billy the Kid and the Green Bay's Vampire, which I caught again at Carl Vivari in July. Alan Clark's like weird snooker-based musical, which is as bonkers as it sounds, but it's class. I know I'm a massive snooker fan, as you may recall. Also a fan of musicals. Combine the two, where can you go wrong? It's got Alan Armstrong as the Green Bay's Vampire and what's his name, Phil Daniels as Billy the Kid, and they become sort of rival snooker players, based upon, I guess, Jimmy White and Ray Reardon. But I've also been making my way through the BBC's Alan Clark box sets, and like all of those are great. I'm not going to list them all, just I recommend you acquire them somehow and make your way through them. They're great. Another one to mention, jumping from 1986 to 2001, is What Time Is It There by Tsai Ming Liang. Another, again, belated catch-up.
You had never seen that?
No,
Wow.
and it's weird because I would call myself a Tsai fan, but felt increasingly fraudulent doing so because it was on the strength of like 2 or 3 films.
Okay.
And yeah, like it's so good. It's so funny.
It's great, yeah.
And
do you think it's his best film? It's probably his most well-liked film.
Well, I always return to the one that I watched first, which was I Don't Want to Sleep Alone.
Oh, really? Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, I need to see the whole lot.
Yeah, I've seen all of them except for Visage.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to make 2019 like the year in which I finally, comprehensively catch up with all of Tsai's feature-length output, and then I can get some kind of reading of his of which ones I like the most.
The only one I've seen twice is Goodbye Dragon Inn.
Oh, right.
It's because it's like 80 minutes.
Yeah. But like that's just the thing, right? Like Tsai Ming Liang is, spoken about in reference increasingly to like slow cinema, even though his films predate what became known as slow cinema. And like, I mean, I can see why he's discussed as one of the proponents of what became to be known as slow cinema, but like his films for me are like way beyond in quality of, the poor imitations that came after that, constitute the main sort of corpus of slow cinema, primarily because the compositions are fantastic. I don't think anyone within the slow cinema sort of canon, if you like, makes films with the same sort of visual curiosity as Tsai does. And they're also incredibly funny.
Yeah.
2 films by Travis Wilkerson, one from 2002, one from last year. The first one is An Injury to One, which I highly recommend as a fellow leftist or left-oriented person. And the second is Did You Wonder Who Fired the Gun, which began life as a sort of interactive, or not interactive, but a performance piece, like an expanded cinema piece. But it does exist in single screen form as well. And it's a film in which Wilkerson interrogates his own grandfather's racism in Alabama. And then lodged in between those two is another structural film, chronologically lodged in between those two is another structural film, 17 Monuments by Jonathan Perel, made in 2012. Jonathan Perel directed one of my favourite films of this decade called Toponymy, or Toponymia. And this is similarly very sort of, structure in approach. The clues in the title, it's 17 monuments shot with a static camera, 17 sort of scenes around Argentina of monuments commemorating the right-wing coup in that film.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it. That's all you're going to get off me in terms of discoveries.
Okay. All right. Well,
maybe you'll list your 10 now, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that would be in mine as well.
Well, there is only one on my list that you just mentioned, and that was Man for All Seasons.
Right.
Which, as we said, we talked about on the podcast before. But yeah, it's just brilliant. Historical drama. The earliest film on here is George Cukor's Gaslight, which I guess it would fall into the category of kind of the Hitchcockian thrillers of the period. But Ingrid Bergman's performance as somebody who believes that she's losing her mind is so unsettling. Her performance is incredible. And yes, it's a great thriller. Another film that I had never seen before, Bonnie and Clyde by Arthur Penn, 1967, which I loved and which I was surprised was so funny. Because it has this...
I presumed you'd seen that.
No, I'd never seen it. And in fact, one of the other films we talked about on the podcast before was Gun Crazy, and I mentioned on that review that, I had just watched Bonnie and Clyde, and that didn't help. That didn't help my response to Gun Crazy, because Bonnie and Clyde is so good. And it has this reputation for obviously being seminal and being this like turning point for Hollywood and ushering in the new Hollywood era, but also being like unprecedentedly violent for the time. But it doesn't have this reputation for being really funny, and it is. Like it's shot through with like dark humor. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. Another film that we covered on the podcast before, The Offense, a film that I don't even think I had actually even heard of, directed by Sidney Lumet, 1973. Starring Sean Connery as a police officer, a British police officer who has arrested a guy suspected of murdering. It's not just girls, is it? It's just kids. Yeah, and he, plays out like 3 kind of interrogation scenes, and it's just like really psychologically dark and fascinating.
That would be one that I would add to my list.
And also, really like a revelation for me in terms of like, oh wow, I didn't even know that Sean Connery was a great actor. Because like I said on that review, he's just Sean Connery to me in the way that Arnold Schwarzenegger is just Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Sure.
Or Clint Eastwood is just Clint Eastwood. But he is great in that movie. I've been trying to fill the holes in my Martin Scorsese viewing this year, and the best one I saw for the first time this year was Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Which is on paper not really the kind of film that appeals to me necessarily, but Ellen Burstyn and I forget the name of the actor who plays the kid, but their relationship is just so good. And it's interesting that, did you know that there was a spin-off sitcom?
No.
There was a sitcom spin-off.
Really?
Yeah, set in the diner. So I was watching it with that in mind. I was like, well, I can see that. Like, you can look at everything that takes place in the diner in that movie, and you can see it as a sitcom.
I'll be honest, I can't really remember it.
Right.
I've seen every, at least feature-length fictional film by Scorsese, and it's one of the few that, I just can't really remember it all that much. Right. I do have it though. I should rewatch it.
I loved it. Okay, and I'm going to depart from the chronological order here a little bit because I just have 2. I think on last year's end of year episode, I had 2 by these same directors. I have the last 2 Dardenne brothers films that I hadn't seen, except for their 2 earliest ones that aren't really widely available. But their breakout movie, La Promesse from 1996, and their 2008 film, Lorna's Silence. And I mean, I don't really know what to say about them. Like they're like the Dardenne brothers are absolutely, I think, among the best filmmakers working today. They're.
Would you say their films are like sort of deceptively complex?
In
the way that it can be very difficult to say what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the appeal of their work for me is that they operate in an extremely low-key genre register. Like, there's often a kind of a ticking clock or some kind of like thriller structural device used, but it is all really pivoting around this very psychologically relatable and plausible moral dilemma. And yeah, and also there's a formal rigor to their films as well that is because like I think like on last year's episode I talked about the other two films, which were L'Enfant and The Son, that I saw last year, and I was saying that, you know, I had kind of not avoided but kind of ignored the Dardanes for a long time, you know, because I kind of just thought of them as kitchen sink social realists. Yeah, but they're much more sort of Bressonian or something like that, and not that they resemble him to a great extent, but there's a certain kind of formal sort of exactitude to their films that anyway, yeah, I think they're great, and those two films are both amazing. Sandwiched in between them chronologically is Master and Commander: The Far Side of the World by Peter Weir.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had never seen that before, and it's just amazing. It's such a great film. Just like it's just one of those films that immerses you in an environment that you're kind of like passingly familiar with, but it gets into such detail of like how everything works. A little bit like when we talked about, you know, the operation of like in a film like Unstoppable or something like that it immerses you in like how the rail system works and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It gives you these details that are just in themselves fascinating, in the way of like reading a Wikipedia article about it would be fascinating, but it's all it's filled with like amazing character actors and kind of a pervasive and escalating sense of peril. This is great, and I love the way that the other ship is depicted, almost like the shark in Jaws or something like that. It's like this thing that's just pursuing them, and we're given very little. Toward the end, we do get to see some of the people on the ship, although they're never kind of opened up to us and psychologized or anything like that. But we do get to see their faces at least. But for the majority of the film, it's just this deadly thing pursuing them.
Crow's great, if I recall.
Yeah, so good.
I've seen it once. It's weird. I can't really remember that much, but it was assigned to class during my masters in film history and production on the basis of its sound design. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's a great film, and I would actually. You mentioned you would love to do Robert Altman. I would love to do Peter Weir. Really varied filmography, like really great films. Actually, now Master and Commander, 3 of his films I would count among my favorite films of all time. Okay, so my last 2, and this one really surprised me in a way not dissimilar to the way one of the films on my top 10 of this year surprised me, and we'll get to that. And it is Super by James Gunn from 2010.
Right.
With Ellen Page and Rainn Wilson as 2 like really psychotically dysfunctional people who decide to become costumed vigilantes. But it's like, so it came out the same year as Matthew Vaughn's Kick-Ass, which I saw and really didn't like at all at the time. And I just kind of, I don't know, I never got around to Super, even though I really like James Gunn's first film, Slither. I really, really liked it. It's extremely violent, but it also has this undercurrent of melancholy to it, and kind of hopelessness, that I found really surprising and like quite moving at times. And then the last film on my list here is A Most Violent Year by J.C. Chandler from 2014, which you know, I was saying that that James Gray's film We Own the Night seems to be like really underrated. So does A Most Violent Year. A Most Violent Year, I think, is absolutely amazing. Like it's
and they're both period films, right?
Yeah.
And they're both quite sort of old-fashioned. Yeah. Classical.
They are like A Most Violent Year reminded me of The Godfather. It's like again, it immerses you in this social milieu, but it's not like, obviously there's a heavy sort of organized crime element in the film, but it's like about like a guy, like an immigrant guy trying to expand his business and like also to try to, but the thing that makes it really compelling, I think, is that it kind of pivots on his like code of ethics. Like he simply will not do certain things, but he will, like, you know, kind of ruthlessly do other things. And it's I thought it was a really, one of those films that feels like a microcosm for certain features of capitalism. Not in a dissimilar way to the way that A Man for All Seasons does, about, you know, the transition between feudalism and capitalism. But, yeah, I love that. I think J.C. Chandler is underrated in general. I also watched Margin Call for the first time this year, and I quite liked it.
I'd like to see Margin Call. That was on my radar when it came out, and for some reason I never got round to it. But it sounded great.
It's good. I wouldn't quite say it's great, I think, but it is good. Okay, that's it. Yeah, that's me for my discoveries this year.
Okay, a lot of those I knew that you'd seen, and I noted that you'd loved them at the time on your letterbox. There's a few, for instance, I had no idea you'd watched The Most Violent Year, and I'm probably as surprised as you are that you liked it.
What did you not like? The Most Violent Year?
No, I can't really. No, I'm just surprised because I can't really remember it. It hasn't really stayed with me,
Right.
and I saw it on the big screen in the context of a festival, and it was just like a catch-up screening, like you know. But yeah, it had a lot of buzz upon release, but then it very, very quickly just sort of dimmed that buzz, and it never really expanded.
It wasn't really an awards player either that year.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, you know, you'll always get like one or two films that like come September, October, they're like, oh, this is going to be like a front runner, and then by January it's just completely disappeared.
Yeah, it was seriously snubbed, I think. Not unlike Sicario the next year, you know, where it was like a lot of hype and a lot of acclaim, but then, you know, just completely ignored. All right, shall we move on to part 2?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on to the top 10 of 2018. Okay, so on this segment, we're going to dispense a couple of awards, or golden raspberries in some cases, I suppose. We're gonna say obviously we're gonna do our top 10, a few honourable mentions, but we're also going to talk about the most surprisingly good film, the most disappointing film, the most underrated film, the most overrated film, the best scene in a bad film, and the worst scene in a good film, which I found really hard. Worst scene in a good film, I think, is hard.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll just go through a couple of honourable mentions here. The last 2 spots on my top 10 are hotly contested with all of my my honourable mentions, but I've just decided to just leave it as it is. Whatever.
Right.
So this is a film I finished watching about 4 seconds before we started recording today, and that is Alfonso Cuarón's Roma, which I didn't know how I felt about it at first. Like halfway through, you know, I was kind of going like, I like this. This is good. I don't know how good it is, and I don't quite see the kind of the masterpiece in it that people are seeing. I think it's beautiful. Like, it's really, really beautiful. And it's consistently engaging and warm and compelling, but I don't know. But I can see certainly the way that the film ends. It has this kind of like, it kind of builds quietly in a, I don't know. It doesn't quite build to like a crescendo of emotion or anything like that, but it definitely, I definitely liked it a lot coming away from it.
Yeah, I think you liked it a lot more than I did then. I struggled with it, although wouldn't deny at all its beauty. It's like, for me, it's just like a bunch of scenes sort of stitched onto one another. I was never really quite sure what it was all meant to sort of mean or amount to. And it's, you know, it's done in that very sort of choreographed way. And its pace never really wavers. So, like, you know, it's got that sort of, you know, obviously Children of Men is my favourite Cuarón film. And that film has sort of action to sort of, you know, fuel the stylistic excess, if you like, which creates a certain grinding quality to it in an effective way. Whereas this feels like, I don't know. I don't really want to get too much into it, and I don't want to complain too much. I didn't dislike the film, but it just left me cold.
Right. No, it definitely didn't leave me cold. It didn't leave me, you know, in floods of tears the way some people are saying that it did, but I thought it was, like, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely beautiful, but I also think that there's a sort of, I don't know, it somehow, even though the central performance is very low key, there's something about the way that the film, it's, I don't know, maybe it's similar to the way that I feel about the first half of Boyhood, where before the kid becomes the focus of the film, we sort of feel for him by experiencing these events through the actions of others around him. Mm-hmm. Like when she, I just have to remind myself that this is a spoiler-free episode. Did we spoil anything on that? I completely forgot about that.
Let's try and do it like sort of.
Yeah. Particularly with the newer films. Yeah, okay.
Because it's not a segment.
No. Yeah. Okay,
Roma.
So just to say, like, there's a scene midway through where she reaches out to somebody, and the response that she gets, I found very affecting. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
I think I do. Yeah.
Anyway, let's move on. Yeah, so I really like that. Anyway, so okay, look, we're not going to spend much time on each of these. Did you see the film Caliber, the British thriller that premiered on Netflix about the two friends who go hunting, and something horrible happens, and then they try to cover it up, and it feels like it's going to go down a particular avenue. I expected it to turn the way that there are these allusions to something that makes it seem like it's going to become like folk horror or something like that. But it never becomes that. It becomes this like really brutal moral drama that I thought was really effective. I really enjoyed I, Tonya. I thought I, Tonya was excellent. Really funny, and Margot Robbie was great. And I didn't even know the story about, like, I think I only knew of what happened with Tonya Harding through like rap lyrics that referenced it at the time.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Like, because the story's like relatively sort of high profile, it takes you aback as to, well, like how did I not?
Yeah.
Like, how did I not know more about this? Like, this is like too cinematic to be true.
Yeah. But I thought it was very good. I really enjoyed it.
I didn't like it so much. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's because it came out this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
It came out 10 years ago.
I
You
don't
would
like
have loved it. Another film, a film that I saw yesterday, and this can't be because of something that surprised me even more. This can't be my most surprising film of the year. But I saw The House That Jack Built yesterday. And I'm not a Von Trier fan. You know, I haven't really liked a film that he's made since Dogville. And that came out when I was obviously a very different age, so I don't know how I'd feel if I revisited it. But I didn't like Antichrist. I didn't like Melancholia. I hated Nymphomaniac. And this film bears a lot of resemblance to Nymphomaniac in terms of its structure and its whole sensibility. But the difference is that The House That Jack Built is really, really funny. And I was thinking, like, when was the last time Von Trier made a funny film? I mean, The Boss of It All was supposed to be funny. It wasn't particularly. But other than that, you know, I mean, Nymphomaniac wasn't really funny. But the first two, that's divided into 5 incidents, and the first 2 incidents...
Well, I'll cut you short because we'll be coming back to it.
Oh, will we? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, the next one is a film that I signed up to YouTube Premium, or whatever the hell it's called now, to watch, and that is the Eminem-produced battle rap satire Bodied, which is so funny. It might be the funniest film of the year. Yes, really? It is the funniest film of the year. Absolutely hilarious. Not only like an incredibly, so it's written by a battle rapper. Sorry, the premise is that there's this kind of nerdy grad student who's doing his dissertation on the new kind of battle rap culture. Not new, but, you know, like a newly popular battle rap culture. And discovers accidentally that he has an incredible gift for actually battling. So he enters the battle rap culture, and it's the kind of the clash between the like aggressively politically incorrect battle scene with the aggressively politically correct humanities that he comes from, and the satire of both is just so sharp. There's a turn in the third act that isn't quite psychologically convincing to me, but the film is really, really funny and very much worth watching. A sequel that I think falls into the category of the films that are inferior to their predecessors and are therefore underrated, and I don't know, am I going to call this the most underrated film of the year, is Sicario: Day of the Soldado, which I thought was just excellent, like brilliant, but not anywhere near as good as the first one, which is the first one is just like one of the best films of its kind ever made.
I wish we could dedicate a segment to this film because it's one that I keep returning to in spite of my initially cold response. I feel like I have 2 sort of responses to this film. One's like a visceral emotional connection, and the other's like a sort of devil's advocate critical sever myself from the emotional response kind of connection, or disconnection rather.
Okay.
And I feel like the film wants to have its cake deleted for reasons that we can't really go into.
On a spoiler-free episode?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, I'll be coming back to it at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one... okay, next honourable mention is Deborah Granick's film Leave No Trace, with Ben Foster and Thomasin McKenzie. Is that her name?
Yeah, we'll be coming back to this one also.
Okay, all right, well then I'll just leave it. And then The Shape of Water is my other honourable mention. Guillermo del Toro. Best Picture. What a weird Best Picture winner.
What a weird Golden Lion winner at Venice.
Yeah, but an even weirder Best Picture winner.
But it's an even weirder Golden Lion.
Is it?
No, I agree.
Yeah, it's,
well, in the current climate, can you see, though, that it's maybe not so weird? Because it's a very box-ticky film.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's a very virtuous film.
I get what you mean there. Yeah, the subplot with Richard Jenkins. Even though Richard Jenkins' performance is great, I could have done probably without the subplot. But yeah, no, I yes, I see what you mean in those terms. Although I don't remember that being kind of the discourse around the film necessarily. In terms of kind of yeah, I get what you mean though. But yeah, no, I really liked it. Beautiful film. I really a little bit disappointed in the musical scene, which is kind of cut short a little bit, but yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. All right, do you want to?
I didn't like it so much. I didn't like any of your honourable mentions, other than one of them, which we'll come back to. I have, let's say, 7 to mention. Although really it should be 5, but then I added a 6th, and then just when you were talking there, I remembered a 7th. So I'll say the 6th and the 7th, if you like. Mm-hmm. One of which is First Reformed.
Oh yeah, sure, I like that.
Which I liked dutifully, but I wasn't bowled over by many of as many of the sort of film Twitter cinephiles were. The Schrader aficionados.
Is it Schrader or Schrader?
You say Schrader, I say Schrader, and we'll meet in the middle and call him Shredder.
Okay.
Nah, it's I'm not really familiar with Shredder's work.
No, I've only seen a couple of his films.
Yeah, as a director, and he's the kind of director, because he himself is like a cinephile or cinematically informed or whatever. He has his fucking die-hard following, doesn't he? And everything he touches is like great. And that's not to say that this film, I have to kind of keep my contrarian streak in check here, given your earlier comments. But like, I liked it. Yeah. It's fine.
I liked it as well. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those films that's kind of, you don't know where it's going to go. You could genuinely at any point in the story, just like it's completely unpredictable. And
you know what? In films about like faith, right? I always sort of search for some kind of deeper sort of meaning, or like a meaning that's integrated into the images more. I don't know. It's weird. Like, and so I get to the end of these films, and I'm always like, okay, so that's it then.
Right.
Like, it never really hits me deeper. I don't know. It's
no, I didn't find it like an emotionally devastating film or anything like that. But Ethan Hawke is great, and like I said, it's completely unpredictable and very unique in its treatment. Like, I mean, this is a story that couldn't have been told before the potentially apocalyptic implications of climate change became known. But like, what does that do to somebody of faith?
Yeah. The 7th film, if you like, that I just added just now is Isle of Dogs.
Oh yeah, I was a little disappointed in that one. I liked it overall, but I was a little bit let down by it. It just wasn't quite funny enough, and I kind of wasn't hugely into the secondary storyline, like the political thing going on with the.
Well, it loses the dogs in the final act,
and the dogs aren't differentiated enough in terms of their personalities from one another for me. I don't know. Yeah. I found it. I was a little bit let down by it.
Okay, so here's where we're gonna really sort of violently disagree. Game Night is an honourable mention for me, right? Which I think or recall that you despised.
I hated it passionately.
Nah, it's maybe the funniest film of the year for me.
Are you joking?
No. Hold on, I'm just thinking what else is coming in my top 10. Yeah, no, it's no. Maybe there's one, maybe two in my top 10 that would be funnier. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot.
I absolutely detested it, and I mean, I should say though up front that I have, like, I don't know who this is for you, but everybody seems to have, like one actor that they just irrationally hate.
Yeah, Keira Knightley.
You hate Keira Knightley. I hate
no,
hate Jason Bateman. I
Right.
cannot stand him, and like the film already, I found kind of just irritating. I do like Rachel McAdams, but I just found it insufferable. I was just squirming in my seat waiting for it to end.
Did you see it in the cinema?
No, at home.
You've got to see it in the cinema. It's a big screen film.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's my honourable mention. I didn't ask what your fucking opinion was. Actually, I did.
Well, it might be my worst of the year.
Shut up, man. Well, you haven't seen much, though, have you? You've only seen like 13 films.
I think I've seen 89 this year.
89.
How many have you seen from this year?
Releases. Commercial releases. I've seen round about 102, something like that.
Commercial ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, where are we next? I've got Shoplifters, the Palme d'Or winner.
Oh yeah, I didn't see either of the two Palme d'Or winners that released this year. Square because
Square being the other one. Yeah,
because I didn't really fancy it.
Yeah, well, it's a bit long for you,
It's a bit
isn't
long and a bit kind of sounded a bit shit, so I decided not to watch it. But Shoplifters, which is as good a reason as any, Shoplifters, I would have watched if I had remembered that it won the Palme d'Or.
Right. It's
because I saw it was in the cinema and I thought, okay.
Yeah. It's a weird film to think of in terms of a Palme d'Or because it's so ostensibly light, although there are obviously like massive, deep implications with regard to how it thematizes social marginalization, through the unit of a makeshift family. But it's a nice film for the most part about, nice people. And it's 121 minutes. Again, it's like a little bit too long, maybe. But yeah.
Have you seen much of Koreeda's other films?
No, that's another reason why I felt instinctively why it's maybe a weird Palme d'Or winner, because I'm assuming he's also made stronger works, but that's how it often happens.
The only other one I saw was Still Walking back in 2008, right, which made my top 5 of that year.
Right.
But I mean, it's one of those things that you look back on and go, I'm sure there were other films I enjoyed more than that. But I remember what you described Shoplifters as being is exactly what I remember Still Walking as being. A kind of like Otsu light or something like that. Yeah, a little bit like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm fine with like coming to directors like that, like in the wrong order, because it just completely liberates me from like that sort of auteurist thing, like where you just it's not as good as these other works, and like who gives a damn? Starting to sound like you. Another one that I think you'll violently disagree with is Cold War, Pavlikovsky's film.
Yeah,
which I I love the formal qualities of it. It's truncated, segmented approach to an emotional love relation, an emotional and romantic relationship that we have to take on sort of metaphorical terms, because it stretches credulity as a an actual relationship. I read the other day on Twitter that it's just two people not being together because they're both shitheads, which I kind of sort of agree with.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. I think it's such an uninteresting relationship. They're just like, particularly the guy is just of no interest at all. He's the blandest man to ever live, and it's just like eliding these enormous expanses of time, and it's like, they happen to keep bumping into each other and having uninteresting interactions. But it's pretty, and it is. It's beautifully shot, but like, who cares?
Did you see Loveless?
No.
Andrea Zjaginsa film.
Not sure.
You didn't like his previous one, did you? Leviathan.
He lost me with Leviathan.
Yeah, this one is this one's similarly sort of panoramic in its scope, and yet a lot more sort of contained in many ways. And because of that, there's this weird tension where you're not quite sure where it's going to go, and you're not quite sure what the final implications of its very bleak or ostensibly bleak narrative are going to be. And then my final honourable mention would be Upgrade.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that later.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Okay, so do you want to give me your 10 and 9, your bottom two? And
My 10 is included begrudgingly, maybe, but then I was thinking it's such a weird film, and it's one that I saw twice this year in the cinema, and it's there alone because of how weird and unique it is, and it's Phantom Thread by Paul Thomas Anderson.
Okay.
Yeah, it's when I was watching it and thinking about it, and discussing it with people, I've ended up repeating the same thing, and it's like, I don't know how you would script a film like that. Like, I don't know how you would arrive at a premise like that. It's such a strange tale to tell, and it's done in such a weird, exquisite way that I feel like I'm going to be coming back to it after many, many years. And I feel like that with most of Paul Thomas Anderson's films, that they only grow the longer you leave between screenings or visits.
I rewatched this. So I saw it when it came out, in February or whenever it was, and liked it. But the way this is spoiler free. So the way that the film is structured and the revelations that are not so much plot revelations as they are psychological revelations in terms of further sort of excavating the true nature of the relationship that we've been observing unfolding over the course of the film. When those revelations happened toward the end of the film on my first viewing, I just didn't know how to take it. I didn't understand. It completely upended my understanding of what I had been watching, and I didn't know how I felt about it. And I came away saying, yeah, I like the movie, but I don't really know about the ending. So I went back and revisited it again, and I still don't really know about the ending, and I still don't really know how. I think it's interesting that the film's biggest champions tend to talk about the relationship on quite an abstract level, and the more they talk about it, the more they talk about it, the less they seem to be talking specifically about these two characters, and they tend to be talking more about these kinds of relationships. And again, I don't know how much more I can say than that without getting into spoilers.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But that always I'm always a little bit wary of that when the discourse around it is less about it than it is about what the greater thing that it is a part of. Hard to talk about without getting into spoilers. So
yeah, I mean, I'm happy to leave it there. Anyway, as I said, it's begrudgingly included here because it, and most of our professional colleagues have since moved on because it was actually a film from last year for them. But in terms of theatrical releases, it is a very, very eccentric, unique film, and I'm going to go out here and say or champion this film for those qualities alone.
Yeah, no, I like the film. Do you prefer the first half or the second half?
First.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
There's that shot where they pull into the gas station, and you can see the church in the background. On their way to, or actually, he's on his way to the retreat. I don't think he has Alma with him. And that shot alone, I was anticipating that shot on the second viewing because I was like, oh, this is so beautiful in terms of its evocation of a particular time and a particular place.
And it's funnier in the first half too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. My number 9, you mentioned it as an honourable mention, is The House That Jack Built. And again, because I watched it so recently, I'm not sure in terms of how solid its place is in my top 10, or if it should even be there. I was really, really looking forward to seeing this film on the strength of what people were saying about it having walked out of it during Cannes. When they took it upon themselves, people who are aspiring to be professional critics walked out of it in protest, quote unquote. How that happens or how that works at a festival like Cannes, I don't know.
Do you know, without getting into spoilers, whether that mass whether that was a mass walkout at a particular moment. Because watching the film, I got the impression midway through that this is the moment that everybody walked out.
Well, I'm talking about
in terms of the third incident.
Right, I'm talking about one particular review that prompted my excitement for the film, and I don't think the author of that review even made it to the second incident.
Oh, okay. The first incident isn't that graphic even, really, though, is it?
Well, I think, it implies heavily, though, that the film is going to be about a killer whose 5 murders that are narrated in the film, even though he doesn't just kill women.
Yeah.
The 5 incidents that through which the film unfolds happen to be, murders of women.
Right. But like,
oh yeah, no, it's fucking ridiculous. I mean, I don't even want to get into the metacriticism about it,
okay.
But it's an incredibly funny film. This, I don't even want to reduce it to a reading of Von Trier, it being about art, and I mean, I think it's very clever in terms of how it positions itself, so that it's willfully, it seems such odd thing to say about any film, but it's not going to convert any new people to Von Trier.
How do you feel about Von Trier though, in general? Not the man himself, but
I missed Antichrist.
Okay.
I missed Nymphomaniac.
You dodged Nymphomaniac.
I feel I watched the good bits on Pornhub, but I really like Breaking the Waves. I think I really like Dogville. I think, and I really like Mandalay. I think
I was disappointed in Mandalay at the time,
but again, I emphasised there. You
haven't seen anything prior to Breaking the Waves? Europa or The Kingdom?
You did, yeah? No,
right?
I don't think so.
Because prior to this film coming out, this might be my favourite Von Trier film, and
right.
Prior to that, it was his first film, The Element of Crime, which is a film that he's more or less disowned. But it plays like somebody it plays like Stalker and Blade Runner worship from a recently graduated film student, and it's like a sci-fi noir set in like a dilapidated, flooded Europe, and about a child murderer and stuff. Just very up my alley.
Right.
It doesn't it doesn't bear much resemblance to his later work.
How did you feel in The House That Jack Built about the sort of ongoing discursive element in it?
I thought it was really, really funny.
Yeah,
I thought it was really wry and funny, and
talking to Bruno Ganz.
Yeah, who well, we won't give anything away.
Yeah.
But it's so divided into 5 incidents. The first 2 of which I would say are the funniest, and the later ones are less funny. The weakest of which is probably the 4th one, I think.
The final one. The
final one is funny too, actually.
Are not just the funniest, but they're they unfold like slapstick comedy almost.
The second one is if it weren't the second incident in this film is the funniest material of the year. Overall, I think Bodied is a funnier film than The House That Jack Built, but
right.
The second incident in this is, and the music cue at the end of that incident is just so funny. Man, it's hilarious. Yeah. So yeah, I was really surprised because I was not expecting to like it very much.
A friend of mine and a friend of the podcast said it would be even better if somebody other than Matt Dillon played Jack.
I thought Matt Dillon was great.
Yeah, he said somebody more earnest, but I think he's great as well. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah, I think he's that's one of my favorite performances of the year. It's really, really great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So
yeah, that's number 10 for me, Phantom Thread, and number 9, The House That Jack Built.
Yeah, Phantom Thread is close to being an honourable mention. I'm not sure. I just didn't want to kind of have too many.
You don't want to reinforce the canon, is what you didn't want to do.
Yeah, well, it's really more of a 2017 film. My number 10 is Thoroughbreds, directorial debut by Corey Finley. He was better known as a playwright, I think. It stars Olivia Cooke and Anya Taylor-Joy, and is also one of the last films with Anton Yelchin. And it's about an upper-class sociopath, played by Anya Taylor-Joy, who is being tutored by a middle-class, I guess, psychopath, played by Olivia Cooke, and they develop an extremely dysfunctional friendship. where like Olivia Cooke is like openly talking about the techniques that she uses to fake emotions and things like that, and they end up deciding to murder somebody. And it has some of the best, like Corey Finley is a playwright. The dialogue is so sharp. It's and both performances are great.
It says on the poster, I haven't seen it, but it says on the poster, American Psycho meets Heathers. But the poster itself, I don't know if you recall it, like a sort of a pink-orange background on the top half, and then, you know, the two characters are standing in the middle, and then you've got an upside-down view of a house on the bottom half, and then the title. Looking at the poster, and I remember seeing it earlier this year, I thought it was a Todd Solondz film.
Oh, I can see that, yeah, it's similar sort of...
So how sort of close are those three things to describe the film, like American Psycho, Heathers, and sort of Todd Solondz?
I mean, I can see the connections to all three of those things, but it's similar to, like, you know, that movie Spring that came out a couple of years ago, the Benson and Moorhead film that was described as like Lovecraft meets Linklater. I was like, yeah, I can see it, but like it doesn't really bear much resemblance to either thing. You're taking
like Benson and Moorhead,
right. You're taking one detail and like ignoring all of the context to make your comparison, to make your sort of like elevator pitch. Anyway, no, yeah, really, really. I mean, it's one of it's like a real writer's movie, you know, and it's two great performances and very, very funny. My number 9 is Mandy, Panos Cosmatos' long-awaited sophomore film. You saw this, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. Although most of what the film is sold on, I think, is the lesser aspect of the film. I think the sinister, dreamlike first half is more engrossing than the kind of splatter, heavy metal fantasy sort of inflected second half.
Couldn't agree more.
Right. But I do enjoy all that stuff. I just don't think that there's a certain kind of emotional energy developed in the first half of the film that isn't quite embodied in the acts, in the actions of the second half of the film, if you know what I mean. Like
if I may quote my own letterboxd capsule on it, I said it reconnected me to stuff I'd forgotten I feared in adulthood. Home invasion, Manson death cults, being, well, I can't say the third thing because it's a sort of spoiler, but the third thing catalyzes the second half of the film.
I mean, are you talking about the fact that she's killed? I mean, that's the whole premise of the film. That's not. That's
I went into it not really knowing the premise, so being rendered helpless as a romantic ideal is killed in front of me. So two halves. One is unutterable horror that, as you said, unfolds in this sort of dreamlike, weird way, and then the other is like sort of drug crazed vengeance, really, and it's the second half of the film in which it's marketed as, or which lends itself to being marketed as, a Nicolas Cage film, right?
Yes, yeah, and particularly the freak out that he has in the bathroom. But
yeah.
One thing that you didn't see his first film, did you? The Beyond the Black Rainbow?
No.
Both of them are set in 1983,
right?
And I'm not sure why exactly that particular year of the 80s. You know, it's not like the year he was born or anything like that. I don't know, but I'm interested in the idea of like a period setting as a kind of a psychic space. You know what I mean? It's not like they're not set in 1983. Neither film is set in 1983. They're not set anywhere particularly, but 1983 is invoked, you know, as part of.
It's the year in which his dad made Of Unknown Origin.
Yeah, that's true, and that's his favorite of his father's films as well. Maybe that's why.
Very different to that film, though.
Yeah, of course we covered George P. Cosmatos on the Journeymen.
Yes.
I thought it was really, really enjoyable. A lot of people complain that it's too long. I didn't find it to be too long. I found it really compelling all the way through.
You know, when we discussed Man on Fire on our on the third of our three Tony Scott episodes, and I said that was very much a film that was in two halves. You've got the build-up, and then the sort of back half is like, you know, enacting vengeance, and it's got that same sort of grind to it where the end is sort of foreseeable, and you're just waiting for it to sort of count down to it. And I think that's a problem innate to these kinds of narratives.
Yeah, although
so I
Mandy...
can see why, the second half of the film for me makes the film feel longer than the first half.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But Mandy has the luxury of its fantasy components to make the revenge set pieces, extremely visually inventive and distinctive.
That's true.
So a lot of movie and comic book references and things like that in those deaths, including a chainsaw fight, paying homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. I just hope it's not another 8 years before Cosmatos makes another film. But
I'm always a little bit suspicious as well when films are become instant cult classics.
Yeah,
or marketed to be them.
Well, whatever about that. But the fact that this film seems to have connected much more forcefully than Beyond the Black Rainbow did. So maybe he won't have as much trouble getting his next one made.
Yeah.
All right. So you want to give me your 8 and 7?
So sorry, just to clarify. So your number 10 is...
My number 10 is Thoroughbreds, and my number 9 is Mandy.
Okay. So my number 8 is First Man by Damien Chazelle.
Okay.
Which is a film that, before compiling this list, I had no idea if it was going to land in the top 10. I didn't know if it was going to be an honourable mention. I didn't really know how
You knew he was going to land on the moon, though, didn't you?
I knew he was going to land on the moon. Spoilers in First Man. Yes, it's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? I don't really go for science fiction. So there are things in this film that when I first saw it, and the only time I saw it at the cinema, I came away with being really frustrated by. So there's sort of two elements to this film conceptually that are obviously, embedded into the premise of the film. So the film is about sort of demythologizing, the moon landing and who Neil Armstrong was as a man. So it dedicates a lot of its screen time to his relationship, to his marriage, and to his family life. And I was frustrated by that because the whole point of the film is that Neil Armstrong's this kind of inscrutable guy who doesn't really reveal much. In the very beginning of the film, him and his wife lose a daughter. And that proves to be sort of, his incentive to keep going. He goes to the moon, and it's his sort of mourning process. And going to the moon is the process by which he comes to terms with his loss. Right?
Yeah.
On paper, that's all well and good, but the how it's dramatized, the family stuff, I think it undermines the film actually, because all the stuff in which it demythologizes the actual engineering that underpins the moon landing, or space travel in general and flight, reignited my fascination for it. I used to love the solar system as a kid, and I knew everything about the planets. And at some point, you just get it gradually, real life gradually just fucking wallops it out of you, unless you become an astronaut, which I obviously didn't yet. And it was on the strength of this film, coming back to it, I was like, you know what, maybe I'm going to rewatch Apollo 13, which is a film that I was very keen on as a kid, and as a teenager or a young teenager. And I rewatched Apollo 13, and that's I know we're not covering rediscoveries this year, but that's a 10 out of 10 film for me, Apollo 13, because I think it nails that balance of, the sort of, not to be crude in my descriptions of it, but the emotional stuff, the human stuff, I guess, and then the scientific stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you. It actually, what you're saying there reminds me a little bit of the story about Warren Beatty's Reds, where, the original idea was to just make a movie about the Russian Revolution, and it was impossible to get it financed unless there was a love story attached to it. Mm-hmm. And it's a similar kind of thing here. It's the movie flopped anyway, but I think that was because, I don't know, it was kind of stuck between, if they were gonna do what they ended up doing anyway, why didn't they just cut all that stuff out of it? And because they didn't fully they didn't make a full concession to those commercial realities anyway, because they made Neil Armstrong such a closed book and made him so kind of impassive, and his relationship with his family so kind of like weirdly strained. Yeah, not strained like fraught with bad feelings, but just strained in terms of like he just doesn't know how to connect with other people. He doesn't know how to talk to his wife or his children. Yeah, and it's like, well, I mean, that's not the concession to mainstream acceptance that you want to make. Really, you want to put like a proper sort of like fucking, you know, Liv Tyler and Ben Affleck in Armageddon, that kind of like love story sort of thing in there. Yeah, which is obviously not there at all. So, but yeah, I totally agree with you. I think I just didn't give a hoot about the marriage or anything like that. I did find like okay, again, this is kind of a little bit spoilerish, but the culmination of the sort of dramatic emotional seeds that are sown in the first half of the movie, the way that climaxes toward the end, in the particular kind of visual context of it, I found like, you know, the contrasting of that kind of like very sort of it's like that kind of Carl Sagan pale blue dot kind of thing. It's like really taking something so tiny as like the relationship between two humans, and then framing it against like the vast emptiness of the universe. And I thought the ending did that quite effectively. I just wish that they had made me care before that about that same relationship.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I very much on board with the film's emphasis on a stuttered, unremarkable, and anti-dramatic, and even years-long process of trial and error. Like, you know, like it has a sort of scene-to-scene progression, especially early on, where we're not really told. I guess, you know, it takes for granted that we know we've gone to space, or at least, you know, most of us believe that we have. But then, like, at a certain point, the Apollo 11 mission itself just sort of happens. And again, I was sort of like frustrated by that in a way, but I loved it at the same time, because like it is something that we've seen, that we know, and I mean, it's just a weird film, and it does very much you know, shoot itself in the foot if it had any sort of commercial aspirations. But I find that fascinating.
Yeah,
so
I agree. All the NASA stuff, all the technical, logistical stuff related to space travel was really compelling and really well realized as well. Like the film, the not just the cinematography, but the camera work is really exceptional and very sort of purposeful. You know, yeah.
A general question here: do you like Ryan Gosling?
Yes, I think so. I don't really have strong feelings about him one way or the other, but he at the very least he is in a lot of films that I like. Yeah. And seems to be appropriately cast in a lot of roles. Yeah, so I can't really think of anything that I've disliked him in.
That's maybe a good way to put it. But it's weird because, like, you know, a lot of people say he lacks charisma or something, or he's very limited as an actor.
That's just simply not true.
This is his most limited role in a way. Like, the character he's asked to play is deliberately, like, you know, as you said, strained, and he struggles to emotionally articulate himself. So Gosling has to do a lot here with his like eyes and, you know, different sort of bodily gestures. Even by not gesturing, he has to do that convincingly, and I think he's perfectly fine in it. But yeah, it is maybe a better thing to say that he's been in films that I like, even love, more than.
I mean, like the idea that he's limited, or that the idea that he always plays this kind of, you know, weirdly blank kind of character is just like, all you have to do is look at his filmography. It's like just not true. La La Land, Blade Runner 2049, Drive, The Nice Guys, The Big Short, First Man, The Place Beyond the Pines, Blue Valentine, The Notebook, you know, like The Ides of March, Gangster Squad, like they're Half Nelson, like they're yes, there's a particular thing that he does that he's quite well known for doing at this point, but it's not the same thing that he does in every film. And he does have
song to song.
He does have range. Yeah. Crazy Stupid Love. I mean, like, he's been in lots of movies. It's weird. It's like people think of Blade Runner, Drive, and Only God Forgives or something, and assume that that's
Yeah.
what he does in every film.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So that's my number 8, First Man, and my number 7 is the 1517 to Paris by Clint Eastwood.
Are you the only person in the world who has this on their top 10 films of the year?
Not sure. I mean, the Americans now, of course, have had access to the Mule, at least in terms of press screenings, but that's not released commercially until next year for us.
Yeah, but that's getting good reviews. The 1517 to Paris is the worst reviewed film of his whole career.
No, it's not. Is it?
Yeah, and to the point that it was being like called an absolute embarrassment, and it's just like unwatchable and really, really badly received.
No, I liked it. It's very watchable for me, and I was very much moved by it. Again, it's a film based on real life events in which the actual people who those events revolve around or involve play their on-screen surrogates. 3 American pals, at least 2 of whom, if I recall correctly, have been in the Air Force or the National Guard. But yeah, all 3 of them have sort of aspirations to serve time in the US military. And then they decide to go on a sort of, backpacking trip to Europe. And the film's just like, takes much pleasure in a leisurely fashion of watching them do very, very ordinary things, tasting and enjoying gelato in Italy, or taking pictures by the fucking.
I was just about to mention the gelato scene. I haven't even seen the movie, but I know of the gelato scene because that was the scene that everybody who hated the movie was talking about. Like, they're just walking around getting ice cream.
Yeah, but like,
and they're not. They're the actual people who they're not actors.
Yeah. Like. And you know what it's building up to, and what it's building up to is, and this isn't a spoiler, the August 2015 would-be terrorist attack on a board on board a train, from Brussels to Paris. A so-called ISIS terrorist who was armed with an AK-47 and arrived on board, ready to sort of kill everyone on it. And these 3 wrestled him to the ground in real life. I'm not going to reveal what happens in the film, but it's a weirdly moving film. Like, so the absolute folly involved in this sort of terrorist attack, like, it's so quotidian and banal the way, like, even he's portrayed, like, and I don't know. It's obviously a tricky one to sort of speak about when the whole idea of the film is in what happens in the final moments. But there's this weird, well, maybe not weird. There's this understandable reaction to Eastwood's latter works with regard to like their, jingoism or their sort of conservative edge. But if anything, I mean, these films are about, just the effects, or just the futility of it all, just the futility of, the militarism in general, like, what these lives just amount to. I mean, it's like, it's asking fundamental questions about, like, I don't know, like serving one's nation, or what it might mean to be like in the position that these guys sort of aspire to. What is heroism? And all the many contingencies that undergird heroism as well. But I don't really feel the need to defend it against strawmen or pathetic people. But,
it is. I just looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is his lowest rated directorial effort at 24%.
Wow, that's just like...
Next up from that is 1990's The Rookie, which stars my friend Charlie Sheen.
Right.
29%. The critic consensus, the 1517 to Paris pays clumsily well-intentioned tribute to an act of heroism, but by casting the real-life individuals involved, director Clint Eastwood fatally derails his own efforts.
Nah, if that's the crux of the criticism, that's a fatal decision. Like, that it cripples the film, I must fundamentally disagree. If anything, it enlivens it. Like, I like them. Like,
okay. I mean, I saw a lot of the reviews, the similar, he made Sully a couple of years ago, which also pivots around this event that only took a couple of minutes to actually take place, but built a feature film around it. I guess they're inverted, though, because Sully begins with that and then follows the aftermath and the fallout of it. So, I don't know. Anyway, I didn't see it, so... Well, I'll see it when we cover Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
Which we will do at some point. Okay, so sorry, can you run me from 10 to 7 again?
10, Phantom Thread. 9, The House That Jack Built. 8, First Man. And 7, The 1517 to Paris.
Okay, so my number 10, Thoroughbreds. My number 9, Mandy. My number 8 is You Were Never Really Here, directed by Lynn Ramsey, which I also just rewatched a couple days ago. When I saw this, this was one of my most anticipated films of 2017. It didn't come out it premiered that year. It came out commercially this year. It was one of my most anticipated films of this year. And I really enjoyed it, but I also found myself feeling a little bit, I don't know, like shortchanged by the fact that we don't actually see him caving anyone's head in.
Yeah.
Like the people that he's dealing with in this movie, like you really viscerally want to like be there when he shows up with his fucking hammer.
And it's one of the better or more unusually directed sequences of the year, isn't it? The one that unfolds on CCTV.
Yeah, but that's the sequence that because the earlier one you do get a little bit more. You do see a little bit more of the actual physical engagement.
But that's the sequence that you're frustrated by.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm also frustrated by it, but at the same time, completely like admiring the approach.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the way that I felt. Like, and I think the twist, the way that it's kind of, obviously we can't talk about it, but the way that certain things are revealed later on, it reminded me a little bit of Green Room. Where
haven't seen it.
In Green Room there is a plot there in the background, but it's buried underneath it's a plot to which the protagonists are oblivious. So it's unfolding in the background of the events that directly concern the people with whom we're identifying, and as a result, you don't really need to pay any attention to it, but you can if you want. And it took me 3 viewings of Green Room to really, first of all, come to care, and then second of all, come to understand exactly what is going on a basic kind of like almost irrelevant sort of plot level in the background. There's a similar thing going on in You Were Never Really Here, where it's not like he's investigating this thing. He's just like a blunt instrument being sent in to do something. But there's something going on in the background, and like I only kind of vaguely understood it the first time and understood it better this time. And I think it adds quite a few layers to the film. And I also think that not so much dramatization, but the articulation of themes of sort of the kind of physically overwhelming nature of like despair and depression is very well visually articulated. Again, it's hard to talk about this movie without getting into spoilers because I'm particularly thinking about something toward the end of the film.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But yeah, really, really, really like it.
I should watch it again. I mean...
Great score by Johnny Greenwood as well.
It's a great score, and it was when the trailer dropped and they used the score in the trailer, and I was aware that that was the score for the film as well. I was like, oh, this is right up my alley. Mm-hmm. But then, I felt shortchanged in the same way you did, and I haven't had a chance to rewatch it.
I mean, I still came away from it the first time really liking it, so it's not like I turned around on it or anything like that. I just think,
as I said earlier,
and I also love Joaquin Phoenix, and I think he's great.
Well, as I said earlier, when you asked me to prepare something to say with regard to discoveries of the year, before I realised you meant fucking actual films, I was going to list Joaquin Phoenix's shoulders, his asymmetrical shoulders. One seems sort of further up than the other. Yeah.
This is because the hammer is heavy.
Yeah, because he's holding a Thor hammer.
Okay, so that's my number 8. My number 7 is Halloween.
Okay.
I don't know if there's any point really talking about it. We already reviewed it.
We reviewed it at length.
Yeah,
for
we spent an hour or
so.
Yeah. Really satisfied with it. Can't wait to see what they do with the follow up. There's no need to spend any time on that. So okay, you can go if you want to hear a review of Halloween. You can go back to episode 10, our 6.5 hour overview of the Halloween series.
Cut forward to
cut 5.5 hours
5.5.
to get to the review of Halloween 2018. Okay, so yeah, give me your 6 and your 5.
6 is a film that I feel like I saw round about a similar time to the 1517 to Paris, and it's also similarly about although more directly about the effects of war and American foreign policy on ordinary American citizens. It's Last Flag Flying by Richard Linklater.
I didn't see that. Purely because I haven't seen The Last Detail.
Well, one of the things that I had to sort of actively spend energy on during the first half of the film was getting my head around the fact that this wasn't a direct sequel to The Last Detail.
Are they the same characters?
It's spiritual.
But are they the same characters?
No, that's the
okay.
That's the weird and frustrating thing. But nevertheless, Bryan Cranston is definitely channeling Jack Nicholson in this film. I don't know why. I don't know the reason why they didn't just make it the same characters, because for all of the purposes they could have. I don't know if it's because Steve Carell is like half the height of Randy Quaid, because that's the character that he would be playing. But yeah, it's an odd one. Nevertheless, it's a very funny film and very accomplished in its tonal shift from the comedy to the more moving aspects. I was moved by it, and I never quite understood when I watched it, came out of the cinema, and then started to read some of the, professional critics writing about it. They just seemed so lazy. Like Peter Bradshaw gave a very sniffy capsule review of it in the Guardian.
One of those reviews that's like 4 sentences.
Yes, well, not that short, but it may as well have been. It's like this sort of embodying a sort of willful refusal to interrogate beyond the film's ostensibly conservative style. And, stylistically it is very sort of conservative in the way that, Linklater can be, if you know what I mean. But there's a savage critique of a truly pointless foreign policy here. And the film centers on the human cost of the war in Iraq. As I said, as felt by ordinary people. I'm also kind of paraphrasing, if not quoting my own Letterboxd review here, if any of this seems or sounds familiar. But it seems weird for me to just criticize a film for not being more sort of critically radical or critical of, or like stylistically radical or critically against, or more sort of overt in its politics, when its characters, it would be like demanding characters to punch above their social station, if you know what I mean. And it seems the film seems very true to these characters. Like Peter Travers in Rolling Stone, I know I shouldn't really be lowering myself to quoting those kinds of critics, but he criticizes the ending for its mixed message, as if having more than one sort of meaning in the end, in the final analysis, is a bad thing. Like innately bad, and as if characters in a drama are supposed to voice ideas that are agreeable or like politically sort of sharp. These guys are just ordinary people whose children have, grown up to be, frustrated and thwarted, if not killed outright, by America and the American system. So it's got all of that to it. It's got this depth to it. And this warmth between the three protagonists that is also incredibly funny at times. And, you've got Bryan Cranston, Steve Carell, and Lawrence Fishburne. How far wrong can you go with those three guys at the helm? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it. It's now, like, there are only 2 other Richard Linklater films that I haven't seen. So I'll definitely get around to it, but I would prefer to watch The Last Detail first. Yeah,
no, you should definitely watch The Last Detail. You should buy the Indicator release, for which I wrote the liner notes, and then that'll tell you everything you need to know about the film. Just read the liner notes. In fact, I'll send you over the PDF. Just read that, and then you don't need to watch the film.
Okay.
And my number 5 is Peterloo by Mike Leigh.
Yeah, I wanted to see that, but I just didn't have time. That's a 2019 release in the US, I think so.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Aha.
It's not until April or something.
Although it received a lukewarm review by a Canadian critic in the British publication Sight and Sound. Weird. I always struggle to conjure the energy to anticipate or enthuse about a Mike Leigh film before I've seen it. Like, they never really appeal to me on paper, and then when I sit down and watch them, come the end of the film, I'm always like kind of close to being knocked out. I'm like, oh wow, that's class. I wouldn't go quite so far as to say this is a knockout on the level of, say, something like Another Year, which is a lot more sort of intimate. But, and of course, you know, you make a film about Peterloo, or the Peterloo Massacre, and it's inevitably going to risk accusations of didacticism or, you know, sort of, I guess, just stacking its cards in favour of one side. And there is that, but, like, it has to. Do you know what I mean? It's like, there's no other real way to sort of approach that material. But one thing that I found really gripping and fascinating by it on a scene-to-scene level was how much of it seems to revolve around oration and the political power of speech and speechifying. And again, this is something that critics have picked up on, like, you know, it's bogged down by all of these long-winded speech scenes. I mean, firstly, they're terrifically acted, wonderfully, like, and to my understanding, authentically scripted, and utterly captivating on a dramatic level. I mean, like, you know, how can you make a film set in the 18 teens in the UK, as class-ridden as England was then, and not make it about the ways in which class finds expression, like literally and figuratively? For me, it just seems like, you know, it makes sense for him to approach it that way. And so you've got all of these different characters sketched out and integrated into one sort of panorama of what turns out to be referred to as the Peterloo Massacre. Like, even the quick process by which journalists on the scene arrive at that eponymous neologism is about language and about the, you know, the speed with which information is circulated and the speed with which that is then digested and becomes part of an objective social reality. So I think it's a very, very intelligent film, and highly recommended.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. What's your favourite Mike Leigh film?
That's a good question. I'm going to say Another Year.
Mine is Nuts in May.
I like Nuts in May a lot.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. In fact, to my shame, I couldn't make it to any of the screenings that my local independent cinema put on recently of a select retrospective of his work. Nuts in May being one of them, but like others that I hadn't even like seen before. Yeah. But they're all good. I mean, like, it's
some of his. I really, really want to revisit Vera Drake, which I watched at a time where I was like pathologically unreceptive to anything that smelled even remotely of social realism.
Yeah, and like that post-war wallpaper chic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I know what you mean in terms of like not being able to get too hyped about his films, because they are. I mean, they're low concept. Like the log lines are never, you know, particularly appetizing in themselves, you know. But yeah,
and it works as well after the film. Like, I don't really have any, you know, compulsion or interest in seeing any of the films ever again. It's weird, and yet when I watch them as they're unfolding, I'm completely gripped by them. Just weird. So that's my bottom 6 of my top 10. 10, Phantom Thread. 9, The House That Jack Built. 8, First Man. 7, The 1517 to Paris. 6, Last Flag Flying. And 5, Peterloo.
Okay, right. So my number 6 is Upgrade, which you mentioned in your honourable mentions. This is such a fun film. It's just like, apparently this is so written and directed by Lee Whannell, who's best known as the originator of both the Saw and Insidious franchises for James Wan. This is a project that he's wanted to make for a long time, but wasn't able to do it until Blumhouse told him he could do whatever he wanted if he did it for a low enough, price. So the film that we ended up getting is a kind of significantly downscaled version of his original vision, which was a much more kind of, I guess, sprawling, expansive kind of dystopian premise.
Something like Chappie. Not in story, but just in terms of like
maybe
that scale,
that sort of scale. Yeah. Because this was made for very little. I'm not sure of the exact price, but it was in like single digit millions. So it's funny that that Logan Marshall Green, who plays the lead in this, is sometimes referred to as like discount Tom Hardy, or not Tom Hardy or whatever, because Tom Hardy was in Venom this year, and the premise is really similar, where they get like essentially infected by this alien intelligence that with which they develop this kind of somewhat antagonistic but somewhat kind of codependent sort of buddy relationship sort of thing. It's just a lot of fun. It's just like a really gory, violent, funny, propulsive kind of almost like exploitation film.
That first scene where it's not an alien form, is it? It's not artificial intelligence.
Yeah, sorry, what I mean is just like an alien in terms of,
out of body.
Yeah.
Yeah. When he gives Stem permission to take over control of his limbs.
Yeah.
And it's so satisfying. Like, I love films in which, like, wrong'uns get their comeuppance. And I find scenes like that deeply satisfying. But the wit and visual rhythm of which, with which that scene in particular sort of unfolds, it's like I get giddy in the cinema watching scenes like that. I start to laugh out loud because the build up of the tension, and you know what's coming, and then it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
But my main qualm with a film like this is that the high concept needs to inevitably, and I feel the same with heist films as well. The wrap up inevitably streamlines the concept and makes it neat and cuts it off.
I don't think that's true with this one at all. There's a twist. There's a twist at the end of the film.
Yeah.
That is not predictable, and obviously we can't talk about it, but the resolution is not something that I saw coming. And it's not really something. I don't necessarily agree with that. I like the ending, because there are two twists in the ending, right? There's a revelation that you kind of see coming, and then there's a further twist that I didn't, at least, and I found quite cool. But yeah, just a lot of fun, really really good fun. My number 5 is Revenge. 1990, directed by Tony Scott. This is another debut feature for my list, directed by Coralie Farjah, and it's a rape revenge movie about it's kind of ambiguously set, maybe somewhere in, like, I don't know, it's set in the desert, but we're never really told where it is, but it feels like it's in the US, and there's like American ads playing on the TV, but the three guys are French, and so is the helicopter pilot who drops them there. Three very wealthy guys are going to go hunting in the desert, and one of them is there with his mistress, who is then raped by one of his friends, and then everything spirals out of control, and she ends up left for dead in the desert. And when they return to finish her off, it develops into this cat and mouse kind of standoff that is incredibly stylish and gory and funny and just insane. It's really, really good.
Didn't see it.
One of the most, probably one of the most acclaimed genre films of the year. A lot of people discovering it. Just a lot of fun. Very, very stylish, and also the style of the film kind of transforms. Like, at the beginning, it's very very slick and very kind of like fashion shoot and kind of like very music video-ish. And then when things go bad, it becomes like gritty and dirty and kind of, you know, it's great. It's really good.
Right.
So, okay, yeah, so that's number 10, Thoroughbreds, number 9, Mandy, number 8, You Were Never Really Here, number 7, Halloween, number 6, Upgrade, number 5, Revenge. Do we give me 4 and 3?
Yes, my number 4 is Leave No Trace, one of your honourable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
I first discovered Deborah Granick, as I think most people did, with Winter's Bone. Still haven't seen her debut, Down to the Bone. This is, in many ways, a kind of inversion of that film in a way.
Of Winter's Bone.
Of Winter's Bone, yeah. You know, about two people sort of negotiating a wilderness. But here they're doing it sort of willfully. Sort of wanting to just live pretty much, you know, homeless. Making their own makeshift shelters in a national park, is my understanding.
Yeah.
And they're sort of found by and sort of brought in by an agency who's, you know, wanting to help them, but the father suffers from PTSD as a result of being a soldier. And it's about the father and daughter's relationship and a kind of shift in, could we say, priorities as a result of what their trajectories encompass.
Yeah, it kind of picks up at a point.
It's kind of a coming of age tale.
It's a coming of age story in a way, yeah. Where it's melancholy in the sense that they're coming to a point in their lives together where their situation is no longer going to be workable.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's one of those quiet films, isn't it, quote unquote? And I kind of sort of agree with what Mike D'Angelo wrote on his letterbox capsule about it when he said Ben Foster is a sort of weak link, or at least his character is, which seems on the surface like would be a massive problem given that he's one of two leads. But I did find it moving nevertheless.
I would agree. I do think Ben Foster is good in the film. I think it's the character more than the actor. I think it's more like a question of what is the connection between his PTSD and his irresistible desire to live off in the wilderness on his own.
Yeah,
like it's not quite clear, so it feels kind of arbitrary.
Yeah,
because he doesn't seem to have an inability to interact with people. You know,
that's true. Although he does push it sometimes. I'm like, oh, just fucking, you know, just wear the clothes that they're giving you. Or just, you know.
Yeah, but you know what I mean. It's like, yeah, I don't know. It just
And it maybe needed one more scene between the father and daughter that provides some sort of levity. You know, just to add some nuance, because it is a pretty miserable existence to the point where, you know, you wonder how she's even got this father-daughter with him.
Yeah.
But I did find it moving, and I'm not sure if I was moved by the film or by its subtext. Like, are you moved by the signifier or the signified, or the idea that the film is trying to sort of, you know, connote, or the mechanisms by which it's connoting it? Is it, you know, do you know what I mean? It's an odd one.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I didn't find it hugely moving. I found it kind of like probably not a million miles away from Roma, where it's like kind of quietly warm and humane, and yeah, I don't know. But yeah.
So that's my number 4. My number 3.
Did you know that her third film was originally going to be an adaptation of a book called Rule of the Bone? So she was going to have her 3 films trilogy would have been Down to the Bone, Winter's Bone, and Rule of the Bone, and
then a remake of Funny Bones, or The Lovely Bones, rather.
Funny Bones,
funny, you know, the Funny Bones, the children's books. My number 3 is Halloween, which I guess there's no need to repeat again, if you've just joined us, where have you been? And you should listen to episode 10, the last hour of our 6.5 hour episode on Halloween. Just a really strong film. We said on that episode...
I thought you were going to say just a really strong episode.
Just our finest work to date. One thing that we did say, both of us said it on that episode, is that we couldn't wait to watch it again, and that we both nearly did in preparation to record that episode. I'm sad to say I didn't quite get round to rewatching it, but could watch it again now. In an instant.
It's out in January on home media, so I'm gonna definitely check it out again. Okay. So my number
moving down. Sorry, I was just gonna say my number 5 is Peterloo, number 4 Leave No Trace, and number 3 Halloween.
My number 4 is the biggest surprise of the year, and that is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse,
right?
Which I wasn't even going to see. I think, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but I thought that it was, just kind of like a throwaway kids cash-in thing for Sony with their Spider-Man license. And then the reviews came out and they were ecstatic, and I was still very skeptical. I was thinking, is this going to be like the Lego Batman movie, which everybody loved, but I didn't like at all? The humor was too kiddie, the references were too geeky, and I'm not a comic book, so I was like, these are comic book readers, and they're loving the fact that it's all these different Spider-Man, and it's like all these different references to different things in the comics. And I thought also the involvement of the Lord and Miller, the guys who did the Lego movie and 21 Jump Street and all that, made me think that it was going to be full of fourth wall breaking meta jokes about we're watching a movie along the lines of Deadpool or whatever, which I generally don't like. So it wasn't. It was actually when I heard Leonard Maltin review it and say that he loved it. I was like, okay, well maybe it's not just for comic book geeks. And I enjoyed every second of it. I think it's probably the best Spider-Man movie ever made. It's so good. It's it's really funny. The action is spectacular. The visual style is really unique and beautiful. The characters are great. It has a heart. It's great. It was just a joy.
Who's your favourite of the Spider-Men in it?
I mean,
as we should say for those who haven't seen it, the premise is as the title suggests, it's penetrating this Spider-Man multiverse. The many different incarnations.
Yeah. So the Kingpin is trying to activate this some sort of super collider thing that's going to cause different dimensions to collide, so that he can get his dead wife and son back from. And get get them from a dimension in which they didn't die, and get them back that way. So even the villain, there's even a heart to the kind of the villain as well, which really helps with it. One criticism Leonard Maltin did have of it in his review actually was that maybe there's a little bit too much going on in it, and I think that that's a fair criticism. But I also think that the premise justifies it. The whole premise of this is that there's too much going on. There are 6 or 7 dimensions colliding with each other, and I don't feel that. The only relationship that I feel is arguably shortchanged slightly is Miles's relationship with his uncle, which I think could have been a little bit. There could have been a tiny little bit more with that, but other than that, I think that I couldn't. It was a huge surprise. I really wasn't. I wasn't gonna. Like I said, I wasn't going to see it, and when I went to see it, didn't expect to care for it. Yeah.
Good soundtrack.
Great
very good needle drops. I don't know. I found it so, and again, this is from my letterboxd. I found it so technically bedazzling, and so conceptually clever, and so rhythmically consuming. And it is busy. I agree that I almost forgot to enjoy it in a way. It was weird. But
you did enjoy it.
Oh yeah, it's fun, and it's occasionally very, very funny.
Yeah, there's some very funny stuff in it.
So which of the Spider?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Is your fave?
I mean, Nicolas Cage's Spider-Man Noir is pretty great.
Yeah, great.
I think, but they're all great though. Even Spider-Ham, the pig, is great.
Yeah.
No, man, I loved it. I can't wait to see the next one. I was thinking, what are they going to do with the sequel?
Yeah.
I've actually no. I think they are going to do. I think it's going to focus on Gwen Stacy. But what I mean is not so much what are they going to do as what are they going to do in terms of retaining the multiverse premise, because that's such a core hook of this movie. I think they would have to going forward.
It should have been. I mean, I'm revealing my cards here and the fact of its exclusion, but it should have been at least one of my honourable mentions. It should be in the top 10, really. Should we just re-record this episode?
Is it not in your top 10?
No.
Oh, wow. Wow, okay. Yeah, anyway, all right, so I loved it. That was great. Right. My number 3 is a film I rewatched the other night, and was also on my most anticipated of the year, and that is Alex Garland's Annihilation.
Didn't see it.
Yeah, well, same as You Were Never Really Here, it was on my most anticipated of 2017. Didn't come out that year. There was this whole thing with it was produced by Paramount, and they did some test screenings, got really negative feedback, and it was co-production between Paramount and Skydance, and David Ellison from Skydance was doing the typical Hollywood producer thing, and he wanted to change the ending and do reshoots to make Natalie Portman's character more relatable and make it less confusing, make it less intellectual, and Scott Rudin had Final Cut and refused to make any changes because he wanted to protect Alex Garland's Final Cut. And as a result, Paramount sold the international distribution rights to Netflix, so it went straight to Netflix everywhere but North America. And despite I've done this many times, but despite the fact that I was looking forward to this movie for like two and a half years, I watched it when I was like half asleep, right? So the second half of the movie, I liked it, but the second half I came away thinking, not sure how I feel about the ending, not sure how I feel about the second half of the movie. So I was really anxious to rewatch it before I put this list together. And it's just great. It's so good. So, you know what it is, right? You know what it's about?
No, not really.
It's okay. So it's about this mysterious place nicknamed the Shimmer that has began when a mysterious object from outer space struck a lighthouse, and it started to expand, and any animals or people that they've sent into the Shimmer haven't come back.
Right.
And Natalie Portman's character plays a woman whose husband is in the army or something, and he is one of the people who was sent into the Shimmer, and he disappeared for a year, and then mysteriously showed back up with massive organ failure, and she a lot is revealed as it goes on about their relationship and everything, but she ends up she's an ex-soldier, so she ends up going into the Shimmer, volunteering with a group of other women to go into the Shimmer and try to make their way to the lighthouse. And when they get in there, they discover that what's happening in there is that essentially, it's hard to explain, particularly without spoiling anything, but it's like genetic codes are being scrambled, and they encounter a crocodile that seems to have been crossbred with a shark, and plants that are all different, growing from the same root structure, or branch structure, and it just gets really weird and really it's impossible to talk about in detail without spoiling anything, but it is just excellent science fiction horror, with a weird ending.
I only just recently acquired Netflix in order to watch a few. Well, actually, it was as a trial, in order to watch some films for the Journeymen episodes, but then decided to keep it for a film that we'll be discussing, I think, in due course, if not very soon indeed. But Annihilation did tempt me early this year to acquire it. And it's still on my to-see list. I still want to watch it.
I'm gonna treat myself to an Alex Garland retrospective over Christmas.
Yeah, including the things he scripted. Yeah,
so he's directed 2 films, Ex Machina, which I loved, and Annihilation, which I loved, and he's written 4 films: 28 Days Later, Sunshine, Never Let Me Go, and Dread. And
he didn't script The Beach.
No, The Beach was written by John Hodges or whatever, but based on Garland's novel. And there's another film, The Tesseract, as well, from 2003, that's based on one of his novels. So I'm going to watch those 2 as well. I've never seen them, but I'm really looking forward to rewatching Sunshine and Never Let Me Go. I would recommend it. I think you would like Annihilation.
Okay.
All right. So do you want to give me your number 2? Let's say. This
is tough. one of these remaining two films had...
We have the top. We have the same top two. We must.
Yeah, we must. But one of them I have recently rewatched.
Oh, well, then okay.
and that bumped it. Well,
we do have the same top two, so we might as well just reveal them.
Well,
and then just talk about both of them, because it appears that we have them in the reverse order.
Yes, I think it must. My number 2 is masterful in tone, editing, composition, cinematography. It seems to be the richest film in the year for me in how it integrates its themes, how it thematizes images, iconographies, and modes of narrative. It's an across-the-board superlative film, or is it across-the-board superlative 6 films?
Oh, wait.
It's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs by Joel.
Wait, so that's your number 2?
Cohen, yes.
Oh, well, then that's my number 2 as well.
Okay, right.
So, yeah, okay. So our number 2 is the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, like, without any spoilers and without getting into too much detail, with six short films.
All set in
the Old West.
Yeah.
Yeah. 3 of these films, I think are, as good as anything the Coen brothers have ever done. I think there's only one kind of like marginal weak link, and it's a good film in itself. I think.
Yeah, it's only weak in relation to the others.
Yeah, it's fine. It's just kind of brief and sort of gag based. It's just like a little quick gag basically, and it just feels kind of slight in relation to the others. Yeah. But yeah, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th stories in this are amazing. Which one?
And the first one's hilarious.
First one's hilarious, and so is the 6th one. The dialogue in the 6th one is really funny.
Yeah, that's true.
So which is your favorite of them?
This is a very good question. I agree with the 3 that you're listing, the strongest ones. The Tom Waits one, which is actually a literary adaptation, right? As is the girl. No, what's it called?
The Girl Who Got Rattled.
The Girl Who Got Rattled, and
with
then,
Zoe Kazan,
yeah, and then the last one I think you said is the other 9 out of 10.
No, 3, 4, and 5. So
3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, the Liam Neeson one, which is.
Oh, sorry, yeah, that's true. Yeah. I've been thinking most about it visually. All Gold Canyon visually.
Yeah, All Gold Canyon is beautiful.
The greens in that, so absolutely amazing. Also, the one that I think encapsulates the theme in the film to which I respond most is, a history of America as one of settlement, and how to make one's life in America is also to plunder by necessity, to plunder the very land that makes it possible, which is the crux of capitalism, right? You cannot live on this planet without in some way destroying it.
Right. You're talking about All Gold Canyon.
Yeah, or in terms of using up its resources. So I thought of that in terms of like very sort of superficial visual level, but the one that sort of haunted me the most in terms of premise and how it delivers its story is the 3rd one.
Meal Ticket.
Yeah.
That could be my favorite thing the Coen brothers have ever done. It's just like it's so up my alley.
Oh yeah. I mean, you watched it before I did, and you tasked me with figuring out which ones. Yeah. How you'd sort of.
I told you that I had given 3 9s, 2 8s, and a 7, and to guess which ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously it's hard to do it as you're watching it because you don't know what's going to come, but then when that one ended, I was like, oh yeah, well that's obviously the first 9 that Bobby can give, because it's like it's not a spoiler to say. Is it a spoiler to say it's bleak?
No.
It's bleak.
It's bleak. It's very bleak. But yeah, I mean the tone. It's easily one of the best anthology films ever made.
I can't even think of one that would match it. But you've seen more anthology films.
No, I can't really think of. I mean, there are a couple there's some horror ones that I love, like Dead of Night and things like that. But, I really great. Ranks very highly for me overall in the Coen pantheon.
It's restored some faith for me in the Coens as well, or at least reaffirmed my love of them. Having allowed myself to sort of go cool on them recently, for various reasons, nothing really to do with them, but maybe me taking seriously the notion that they condescend or look down upon their characters, which I don't think is true. Yeah, it's great, and the tonal shifts are there, and it made me really, really want to rewatch a lot of their films, if not all of them.
Yeah, particularly True Grit. I want to see that again.
I want to watch that again. Currently, their weakest that I've seen.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you not seen all their films?
I haven't seen The Lady Killers.
Oh, I think Intolerable Cruelty is their weakest.
Of all of them, I really made me want to rewatch Inside Llewyn Davies and their most previous one before this one, Hail Caesar. Yeah. Right, so that's our number 2.
And our number 1 is
Mission Impossible Fallout.
Yeah.
I said on the build up to number 2 there, I said one of these had the luxury of having been rewatched recently, and therefore it got bumped up. Actually, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, by virtue of being the most recent one I watched, was at number 1 until I got home the other night and began to watch Mission Impossible Fallout, and I'd forgotten how relentless it is.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't stop. But the whole thing unfolds like one extended scene.
Yeah, on paper it's grossly overlong, but it's every second of it is.
Yeah, it's
so
really
thrilling.
strange. MacGuffins galore early on. I think it's when they're in the Paris sort of club.
Mm.
Yeah, after that amazing sequence where Tom Cruise and Henry Cavill
in the bathroom,
parachute. Yeah, firstly parachute.
Oh, sorry,
the plane down,
the halo jump,
and then when they're in the bathroom, which is class.
Yeah, oh.
But then the scene after that, where they do meet the lass who he's meant to meet up with,
mm-hmm.
when he just sort of charms his way in, and even that action sequence. So you've got a pile up of action scenes, and it's at that point at which I'm thinking, hold on though. What's the actual purpose of this mission? I don't actually know. And nor am I meant to, I think. I don't really care. My only real qualm with the film, in fact, is that...
Isn't it to retrieve 3 bombs or something?
Yeah, but they have to jump through hoops in order to get them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And they allayed some information early on, I think, during between the scene, the pre-credit scene, and, the hour or so, what happens after the credits sequence, opening credits, that is. I think there's something missed out there deliberately that we're in sort of catch-up terms. And my only real qualm with the film, really, is the final act, perhaps inevitably, has to clarify its stakes, which I think gives a sort of counterintuitive purpose to what before that point has been a deliriously quote-unquote pure action film. Think of the crudity there. You can't have action separated from story.
Yeah.
I guess you could, but it wouldn't really mean anything. But so you've got a lot of cross-cutting in the final sequence. I'm not going to reveal what it does or what it is, although I presume a lot of people that are listening to this have seen this film. You've got an impossible mission element to the final sequence, which I do find giddy, or I do find myself responding to giddily in the same way that I said I do in certain scenes in Upgrade. As if, how are they going to get out of this, or how are they going to do this, which I do find very fun. But it's maybe also my least favourite sequence of the film.
I really liked the climax of it because I rewatched all of the other 5 films prior to seeing it, and I had only seen 3, 4, and 5 once each. I think I watched 3. I didn't see 3 in the cinema. I saw 3 before 4 came out.
Uh-huh.
So I hadn't seen 3 or 4 since then, and I hadn't seen 5 since it came out. And 5, I remember 5 disappointing me, but when I rewatched it, I was like, this is the best film of the series. And I still think it is. I think it's just what Christopher McQuarrie does with this material is just takes it to another level. And I think the original Mission Impossible is underrated now. I think people have forgotten how good that was.
Yeah.
And, yes, the Langley infiltration and heist is iconic and amazing, justifiably. but like the noirish aspect to the first one that is not carried through in any of the sequels is also spectacular. Like the kind of shadowy streets of the opening sequence, and that's great. And then the explosive like on the train thing, that's great. It's fantastic. And also the first film has the best villain in the whole series with John Voight.
Yeah.
And spoiler for Mission Impossible from
sorry,
20 something years ago, but yes, and Jean Reno as well is great in it. It also has the most kind of like Byzantine, incomprehensible plot of them. But it just doesn't matter. Who cares? It's great. Anyway, I hate Mission Impossible 2. I watched Mission Impossible 2 again. It's just so bad. It's such a shit film. It's really terrible. And I like a lot of people were saying, like Mission Impossible is like one of the best blockbuster series because even the worst entry is okay. No, it's not. Mission Impossible 2 is terrible.
Doug Reese Scott and Tom Cruise going towards one another on bikes, pulling wheelies.
It's so bad. Anyway, 3 is really good. 3 has a great villain in Philip Seymour Hoffman as well, but I really think that what Christopher McQuarrie has done is taken it to another level in terms of like there's a real sort of sense of kind of like, I don't know, camaraderie and like heart, and there's a psychological depth to the characters now that isn't there in any of the previous films. I just absolutely loved it. I can't wait to watch it again as well.
Tom Cruise acts weird in this film. Like some of the reaction shots, like not badly, don't get me wrong, but like he seems like facially he seems to be overacting all of the time.
I didn't notice.
Like it works, but it adds a weird sort of feel to the whole thing. Like if you'll recall, the first ever scene in this film is a dream sequence, which is kind of new, is it, to the series?
Yeah, I don't think there's any dream sequences.
It's a nightmare actually. And like the unsettling dreamlike quality of his performance in that scene is weirdly carried over to the rest of the film, which isn't a dream.
Oh man, I want to watch 5 and 6 again right now. I was just thinking of the opera house sequence in 5.
Yeah,
so good. And Rebecca Ferguson is such a great addition to the series as well.
Agreed.
It's just great.
Yeah, it's class. I mean, I watched it 2 nights ago, Mission Impossible Fallout, and I might just watch it again after.
Have you seen Rogue Nation since it came out?
No.
Oh, rewatch Rogue Nation.
Really? What?
Yeah.
Before I rewatch?
Yeah, because it's like Fallout continues, like the same villain, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's like it feels, because obviously Fallout is the first time that a director has come back for a second installment. Whereas kind of one of the cute features of the series was that they brought in a different director each time.
But it's the first time as well where the film or the franchise has sort of touched upon like becoming lore, like its own like continuity. Although characters obviously continue, like Ving Rhames and fucking Simon Pegg or whatnot, like the fact that like the villain in this film has a psychological edge over Ethan.
Yeah.
And
well, he's killed the villain in every other film.
Yeah.
So
no, it's class. It's really good.
So
and it's good in it, and it's good in an unusual way as well.
Why aren't all like blockbuster action movies this good?
Yeah,
Christopher McQuarrie needs to direct them. I mean, and obviously, like you got to give credit to Tom Cruise as well. He's obviously been a producer on these films since the first one.
Yeah.
And J.J. Abrams, who's also been a producer since the third one.
Yeah.
So it's that team kind of, and McQuarrie is like quite close with Tom Cruise and has done like script polishes and stuff like that on a lot of his films, like Edge of Tomorrow and even The Mummy. Yeah. But yeah, it very much feels like a team effort at this point, and that they just have the right people making these films.
Yeah. Henry Cavill's good in it as well.
Henry Cavill's great in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone's great in it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's such a great film.
Even Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, because they have the secondary plot. Jeremy Renner is kind of sidelined, as he has tended to be in every franchise that he's been prominently positioned in, has ultimately pushed him to the side. I really like Jeremy Renner, but I've generally more liked him in indie films and smaller films. But I don't know what else to say about that. That's great. How many of the films on your top 10 have you seen more than once then?
2, Phantom Thread and Mission Impossible Fallout. My 1 and my 10.
Right, I've seen You Were Never Really Here, Revenge, and Annihilation twice.
How many of the others do you like really want to see again?
I really want to see Fallout again. I really want to see Spider-Man again. I want to see Upgrade and Halloween again.
So for me, Halloween and First Man are the ones that I really want to rewatch again. Like Halloween because I know that I really like it, if not love, and First Man so I can sort of wrestle with it a bit more and enjoy what I enjoyed more and maybe get more frustrated by what frustrated me, but like come to terms with that dialectic. And I should say probably inevitably I knew I would have a fucking big regret on this episode, but yeah, I should have considered Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse a lot more. But it is going to get one of my awards.
Okay, so yeah, let's do that. So what would you say is the biggest surprise of the year?
So, biggest surprise of the year would be... Can I give like multiple films for these?
No.
Yeah. Like, surprisingly good film. Well, Halloween. I was surprised by like how much I enjoyed it.
Were you surprised relative to, like, if I had asked you at the beginning of the year what your anticipation was for Halloween, were you surprised in relation to that, or were you surprised in relation to having already watched the other 10?
Both.
Okay.
Both, yeah. And then Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
That's definitely my most surprising one. But
I mean, I guess Game Night, because it's a film that I would never have given time to or even wanted to see had I not had my Cineworld Unlimited card. And, you know, just to maximise the value of that, I've gone to see a lot of fucking trash this year. But like that turned out to be a really surprisingly good film.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the other one that I would throw in there is, like I said, The House That Jack Built, because my track record with Von Trier since Dogville hasn't been great, but I really enjoyed that. Most disappointing film of the year?
I would have to say maybe You Were Never Really There. You Were Never Really Here.
Okay.
I didn't really have any, anticipation at the beginning of the year for it. I know that you were really looking forward to it, but just on the strength of the trailer, I was like, oh my god, that looks amazing. And then, yeah, although, don't get me wrong, didn't dislike it. I definitely want to see it again. Another one would be The Wild Pear Tree by Nuri Bilge Ceylan, whose films are getting longer and longer, but not, as it happens,
better and better,
slower and slower. Yeah, they're definitely getting better, but they're not getting slower and slower as well. They seem to be more seems to happen in each one, and yet they become more and more interminable.
Yeah, I felt Winter Sleep, like, because Ceylan is like, slow cinema, or his reputation was at the beginning, and like Winter Sleep, I don't think fits that description at all. And even he describes it more as like novelistic, which is a pet peeve of mine. Because it might be long, but like you don't read a novel in one sitting. So
it's true. But yeah, The Wild Pear Tree would be maybe a big disappointment, and also BPM.
Oh yeah,
the Robin Campillo film, which I didn't particularly like, having listed it at the end of last year as one of my most anticipated films.
What about a certain Ridley Scott effort?
Well, we'll come to that.
Okay.
I don't know if it's my most. I don't know what I like, because you have to map your emotional response to what you expected from it, and I didn't really.
Yeah, yours was more sort of like morbid curiosity. Yeah. Right. My most. I have two answers here, and again, it's a question of like a disparity between what I hoped for and what I got. I would have to say that my most disappointing film of the year is Jeremy Saulnier's Hold the Dark, which I would have said was my number one most anticipated film of the year, because Green Room is amazing, Blue Ruin is amazing, and Hold the Dark sounded amazing. And on balance, I still quite like the film. I think it has a lot in it that's good, but it's meandering and unfocused and sprawling and kind of awkward and just disappointing. Yeah. Like really one of those films where you kind of sit down and you're so excited to watch it, and then you get that feeling, 30 minutes in, 40 minutes in, like, oh no. But it has it's definitely a weird film as well. It's got a lot of different kind of tones, and so it's got like a war thing going on. It's like an amazing action sequence, like a shootout in the middle of it, and this weird kind of like horror stuff going on in it as well, folk horror stuff. But it's a bit of a mess as well. It's an adaptation of a novel that I haven't read, but it has that feeling of a poorly adapted novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that's my most disappointed. I still give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
But the other one, and this, if we had an award for most surprisingly bad film, which I suppose we could, is Shane Black's The Predator, which is like shockingly bad. Like I thought,
like surprising because of the talent behind it.
Yeah, and the fact that and the fact that I mean, despite the fact that I'm a big fan of Alien versus Predator, I really felt that like the title of Best Predator sequel was kind of there for the taking.
Right.
Because Predator never had an Aliens, to Alien.
Yeah, I get you, yeah.
And I thought, Fred Decker coming back to co-write with Shane Black, and like, it's just terrible. It's such a bad, and the most like frustrating and bewildering thing about it is that it isn't even really a Predator film, because the central premise of Predator is that, this is an alien species that hunts game, intergalactic game, right? Finds other species that are, it's like the most dangerous game or whatever. It's that kind of thing. So they come to Earth to hunt humans. But that's not the premise of this film. This is like an alien on the run from its own law enforcement, bringing some of its own technology to Earth. I don't want to spoil it, whatever, but it might as well not be the Predator. Like, you could lift the Predators out of this film and put some original extraterrestrials into it, and it would be the same. So that's kind of weird on a basic concept level. And otherwise it's just like, it's just shit. Yeah, I'd say those two are my most disappointing. Kind of different contexts, though.
Okay.
Like, I wasn't super excited for The Predator, but I was shocked at how much of a miss it is.
Have I been shocked by how bad any films have been? Probably not.
Okay, what about most overrated?
I suppose I have to say Roma, by virtue of it topping the Sight and Sound poll. And I guess Jean-Luc Godard's The Image Book.
Was that released this year?
It was on Mubi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I found just really, really insufferable. Just like, and like, it's the kind of film. Obviously, Godard's name alone has critical capital, but like, if anyone is putting that at the top of the list, like, I'm just, and I know people who have, like, personally know people who have colleagues, and I'm just like, get over yourself. You're not convincing anybody.
Yeah.
Like, it's difficult to read it in anything but bad faith. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I mean, like, I didn't see this one, and I'm not gonna, but the Goodbye to Language, which I did see just out of kind of idle curiosity, because I knew that if I didn't see it in the cinema in 3D, then I wouldn't be seeing it the way it was intended, and I knew he was going to fuck around with the 3D stuff, which he does to, like, headache-inducing effect. But it's just so much of it is just dumb, and you're just looking at it going, well, if this wasn't Jean-Luc Godard, no one would take this seriously.
Sure. Oh man, like, as I tweeted the other day, like, I was laughing when I was watching it, imagining anybody other than Godard submitting it to a festival, with the fucking, like, the log line, the optional longer description. It would just get rejected outright, man.
Yeah.
And like, the arguments that he may tease at about the footage that he's directly quoting, I can get all that from watching the originals. Like, I don't need to watch The Image Book to be told that, like, films depict oppression or maybe even institutionally a part of oppression. But, like, this whole conflation between actual violence and representations of it, I mean, you can see why at this current moment, critically deficient as we are, that a film that purports to argue that is, championed or whatever. It's just like, it's so fucking dull. So yeah, that, and like Roma, which I don't think is a bad film by any means, but it's overrated.
I think a lot of it is like, it comes across as, speaking about Goodbye to Language, it comes across as like aimless, purposeless, quote unquote rule breaking. Like, oh, that's not the way you make a film. Well, that's the way I'm going to do it. There's a moment where somebody pulls into their driveway in Goodbye to Language and the shot is upside down.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, fucking like, if Steven Soderbergh does that, everyone fucking derides him. You know what I mean? Like arbitrary stylization.
yeah, and to no aesthetic effect either.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm speaking as someone who's never been a fan of Godard, even his Nouvelle Vague material, whereas you were a huge fan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but yeah,
he's
no, as I said,
losing fans left and right, and not converting anyone.
I mean, I think there's the romantic idea of putting an 88-year-old director's film at the top of your list, so that when he dies, probably next year or the year after, it's like, oh, his last film was like a masterpiece. What a swan song! Like, no, fuck off. No, it wasn't. It was shit. And it's like, it doesn't even like there's a fucking like an implied disdain throughout the film for like audiences of like so-called ordinary films. Like,
that's like. Did you see Forever Mozart? His 1996 film.
No.
There's a whole thing about like Terminator 3 is coming out. Obviously, Terminator 3 didn't come out. It wasn't coming out. It was a speculative thing, but it's used as a exactly for that purpose, to kind of lament how base popular tastes are. Fucking rather watch Terminator 3 than any Jean-Luc Godard film.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was your most overrated. What's your most underrated?
I think Upgrade, and also Last Flag Flying, I have to say.
Okay.
You know what? I've completely forgot some of the films that I had in my honourable mentions. Like films that I actually like.
What do you want to do about that?
I'm just going to have to add them now.
Okay.
And just, yeah. I forgot to mention Downsizing.
Okay.
Forgot to mention The Nothing Factory, Pedro Pino's kind of great docu-fiction about a group of work, 3 hours long, mind you, so probably not up your street, but it's about workers taking over a factory in Portugal. Let the Sun Shine In, the Claire Denis film, with Juliette Binoche, which I saw last year, which I didn't see again when it came out this year, which I really, really liked, and Lady Bird.
Oh yeah, I like Lady Bird. Okay, so
I can't believe I forgot those. Anyway, yeah, sorry.
My overrated films. I mean, Black Panther.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Black Panther.
Ridiculously overrated, mediocre superhero film. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and I kind of expressed my opinion on it. But Cold War,
right?
Just pretty empty, tedious crap. I thought. Liked Ida, but did not like Cold War. I also think A Quiet Place is very, very overrated.
Right.
To the extent of getting like Oscar buzz at this point.
It is?
Yeah, it is, for performances. Emily Blunt in particular. It just doesn't work for me on a conceptual level, where in order for those suspense sequences to work, there has to be a clear understanding of stakes and rules in terms of like how much noise they can make, what will happen if they make noise, and it just is never consistent. And it's like the premise lends itself more to something, a sort of like gallows humor along the lines of a Final Destination movie or something like that, and instead they treat it with this kind of dour tone that's like reminiscent of like The Walking Dead or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like these creatures are the worst predators imaginable. Like, they have no sense of smell and no sense of sight, and if you make a noise, they will come to the site of the noise, but unless they were right beside you, then they're not able to find you. As long as you just stay completely still and make no further noises, they're not able to find you. So it's like, what?
Yeah.
And then you have these like logistical things that are, okay, so a lot of people have taken issue with the fact that, the creatures, like, these people are living in the quietest place that they could possibly live. They're living in the middle of like a farm, and they, at one point, they go somewhere where there's natural noise, and he says, "Oh yeah, it's fine. We can make noise here." Well, why don't you live there then?
Yeah.
A lot of people have taken issue with that. That bothered me less, though, than the fact that the suspense sequences don't really work, because I'm thinking, like, I don't understand the rules here. I don't understand what, Anyway, it's okay. It has its moments, but I was pretty disappointed. And underrated. I've got two here for underrated as well. The first of which is Sicario: Day of the Soldado, which, I thought was really, really good, really thrilling and entertaining, and thematically complex and confrontational. Just not on the same level as its predecessor.
You need to reread or read my letterboxd capsule on that to realise what's wrong with it.
Okay.
I mean, not now.
Okay. The other one that I wanted, this is one that I enjoyed quite a bit, is The Nun.
Right, didn't see it.
Which
I did see Jacques Rivets restored and re-released The Nun.
You saw the highbrow one.
Yes.
This got torn apart, really, didn't it? And it's I don't know, like, I think that the discourse around it embodies a lot of the kind of prejudices that are circulating in commentary on genre films at the moment, and pertain to films like Hereditary and things like that. And there's an overstated backlash against it, where so-called art horror is denigrated. I'm of the opinion that I don't really care whether it's like art house or mainstream. For me, though, like, this film is just like saturated in like gothic atmosphere, like fog-drenched graveyards, and like the whole middle portion of the film, I hesitate to say second act because it's so underwritten, but it plays out like a haunted castle kind of scenario where impossible things are happening, and it's like they're all in some sort of weird kind of suspended waking nightmare. And it's like just like great kind of like profane Catholic imagery, and it's just fun. It's just very much my kind of thing. And I don't really understand how, say, a film like It can get rave reviews and a film like The Nun can get panned, when the things that The Nun is getting panned for, except for the writing, but like the particular devices that are being used, like so-called jump scares, are the same devices. I don't know. Anyway, I thought that was underrated. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to watching it again. So best scene in a bad film and worst scene in a good film are our last two awards.
In that order, I have two candidates for best scene in a bad film. Although I wouldn't say one of these is a bad film. I just think it's disproportionately good, the scene I'm talking about, and that's the dirt road shootout in Sicario 2, which is, I suppose, the equivalent of the Mexican-US border showdown in the first film. Yeah, I thought this one was class as well, like very different, and the stakes are heightened in a very different way. It's mint, and I love films in which, trained mercenaries, basically, the professionalism of the Americans completely outweighs the amateurishness of the foreign entities. But the latter are able to sort of at the outset of that scene anyway, or to employ the landscape against the protagonists, who are then able to sort of regroup or flip the tables. I love that sequence. Again, I don't think the film's a bad one. I just think I want to love it more than I do. It's one of those things where I'll revisit it in a year or two and I'll be like, oh yeah, fuck it, who cares what critical objection I had? It's great. And another one, a candidate, and I think this is yeah, I would say it is a kind of a bad film, but it's a brilliant, it's probably my favourite sequence in the whole year, is the dance sequence, the first dance sequence in Climax.
Oh,
That's what I know is Climax. So the first scene in that film is a bunch of like audition tapes that introduce us to the many, many characters who are going to spend time within the film. And then the second scene proper, or the first scene proper, sorry, but second scene in the film is just an extended dance sequence, which is absolutely class.
Yeah, it's great.
Loved it.
Yeah,
and I thought the whole thing was going to just unfold in that way.
Yeah.
Would have preferred it.
Yeah. Yeah, the film, it runs out of steam. It's imagine that was as long as his previous two films. Yeah, like it really benefits from its short running time.
Yeah.
Okay, so my best scene in about. Sorry, you want to give me your worst scene?
Am I going your worst scene in good film?
No. Let me do mine first, actually. So,
right.
like, yeah. So the my best scene in a bad film. I'm going to give you that one as well. I'm going to say Climax, the dance.
Right.
And the other one, which is an absolutely fantastic scene in a film that I otherwise didn't like at all, is the home invasion scene in Assassination Nation, which is
haven't seen it. Damn.
Right. So I don't. This is kind of difficult to. Okay, so maybe these are like very, very minor spoilers for Assassination Nation, but I think it's kind of in the premise. The whole town turns against these girls because they get accused of something that it's essentially like a riff on the Salem witch trials, but it's all like social media based or whatever. And directed by Sam Levinson, Barry Levinson's son. The home invasion sequence is shot in a single take that never enters the house. So it circles around the house as the inhabitants of the house are moving to. They're not aware that the home is being invaded, but they're moving to just make sure that the windows and doors are locked and that the alarm is set, and the camera is prowling around the outside of it and revealing to us that people are already inside the house. And the camera's moving from the first floor to the second floor. It's all a single take. It is absolutely amazing and absolutely worth checking out if it's on YouTube or something like that, although I can't quite recommend the film. But that one shot is like, I was watching that thinking, oh my god, I wish this was like a home invasion film, and I wasn't watching Assassination Nation. So that's definitely a clear winner of that award, best scene in a bad film for me. Okay, worst scene in a good film?
It's one that you haven't seen, but there's a scene early on where two of the parents of the young lads visit the principal's office in the 1517 to Paris. One of whom is played by Judy Greer, who then pops up later in Halloween. It's just like, I don't know, it's like the acting, the tone of it, it's like, it's bad. And it's like, I feel like I'm misremembering American Sniper, but I feel like American Sniper operated on the same level, like, for the whole film. Whereas this, it's like early, and it's early doors as well, so I'm thinking, Jesus Christ, this is like car crash stuff, but then the film sort of like opens out, and it's much better. But yeah, it's just, I even forget why they've been called into the school, but yeah, it's not good.
Okay, I have two that I'm going to group together because they're similar, and they're both scenes in which characters sing at strange moments, right? So one is in You Were Never Really Here, which made my top 10 of the year. There's a scene where the guy is dying and they sing I've Been to Paradise.
You didn't like that?
No, I didn't like that. I thought that was weird and kind of arch.
Right.
And the other one is in a film that I know that you hated, and that is You, July 22. The single take depiction of the Utoya Island massacre, where the girl sings a song.
Was that released though?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I liked the movie overall. I thought it worked effectively as a thriller.
Nah.
And what?
Nah, not.
I think it works as a thriller, or horror even. And the formal device is kind of effective in stretches, but as a whole, like the fact that the whole film is one take, is of very little value to me. Because at a certain point, particularly when we stay in a static shot for a long time, you kind of forget that it's the same shot. At that point there may as well be cuts. And anyway, whatever. It's sort of.
I know the bit
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't
yeah.
really say scene, can you? But I know the bit to which you're referring.
Sure.
Um,
And it's a very, yeah, it kind of shatters the verisimilitude that they're going for momentarily, but
Because you mean like with the camera tilting at a certain moment?
uh, I'm not sure about that. I'm just thinking of a scene in which a character sings at a strange moment, but let's not say any more than that.
Ah, right, okay. I thought you meant one
Sings
character
a
comforting
song.
another
No, 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 no.
as the other one dies. Right, right, right. I got you now.
Singing a song that is kind of symbolizes the ideology under attack, I suppose.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I thought that was
yeah.
kind of... Anyway, and the other one is another film that I know that you hated, but I'm not sure why exactly. The train scene in Darkest Hour, which is just like so cheesy, so corny, so daft.
Yeah, it's bad. I
It's
mean, that's the worst scene in a bad film, though. That
no,
like,
I think that's a good film though. I think
whatever.
it's a good.
You're a Tory though. You love the Tories.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, okay. I mean, forget the fact that I disliked the film overall. I didn't hate the film, by the way. But yeah, I disliked it. But yeah, that scene, which is completely fabricated. But even like that's not the problem. Even within the film's own world, it's corny and fucking
yeah,
horrible.
yeah. No, it's a terrible scene, but the rest of the film is good. Yeah. Okay, so that's that then. Shall we move on to the third
Rapidly, let's
segment?
just fucking
Yeah.
like reel these off.
Okay, so moving on to the third segment, our most anticipated films of 2019. Okay, to start off this segment, let's just go through our top 10 most anticipated films of this year. And some of them we will have already talked about, but let's see what else we had on our lists.
Yeah, we compiled these lists on the equivalent episode that we did last year when we were still on another
which we'll
podcast.
make available at some point.
Yeah. So my 10 were All the Money in the World, which, as we've said earlier on this episode, I wanted to see out of morbid curiosity because at this time last year, it was about to be released, having, Ridley Scott having just like reshot all of the sequences in which Kevin Spacey was due to appear with Christopher Plummer. And he did it in like something stupid like a week or 3 weeks or something like that. Okay, so I didn't like it at all. It was a complete mess of a film. I give it 3 out of 10. Although no more scores for the remainder of this episode, please. I thought it was a complete mess. Like I was watching it like almost slack-jawed with like how clumsy it was. Just like story was kind of inconsequential, or at least the treatment of it was.
I was kind of more indifferent to it.
And I didn't like it at all.
It wasn't on my top 10 most anticipated.
I mean, like, Sir Ridley Scott, always makes a point of like, how like, everything starts with the image and I storyboard for this, which, I'll grant him on practical terms, presumably that allows him to, make as many films as he does in his old age. But like the film's just not visually interesting. I mean, it's got one interesting image in the whole film, and that's when all the newspapers are flying around him in the wind at the end of the film. But like other than that, it's just like whatever. Another one is BPM, which I've already mentioned. Robin Campillo, one of my most disappointing films. I should say also, like at the end of the year, I don't look. I was forced last year by you to come up with 10 films I wanted to see, right? As you have done this year as well. And as a result of that, I just looked very cursorily at your fastidious records on Letterboxd of the films that are scheduled to be released, and very quickly made a list of films that were due to be released in the next.
You don't have to apologize for your...
So I could sustain some kind of interest in them. Yeah, you don't have to apologize for my like terrible taste. So BPM, which I didn't really like. Isle of Dogs, I mentioned it as an honourable mention there earlier at the top of the episode. I don't know why. I can't really like defend it, and it's one of those that kind of disappeared, really, didn't it? Another one that I didn't see was Journeymen, not to be confused, with the Journeymen Film Podcast. But yeah, I wanted to see it because I love Paddy Considine as an actor, and I think he's. I wanted to see him in his own film, although I didn't really like Tyrannosaur, his previous film. I didn't see this one. I'm a terrible Paddy Considine.
Why did you not see it?
I just, it just came and went. You know, it wasn't in cinemas long enough, and I was presumably overseas when it was released. And yeah, just didn't pursue it or track it down or whatever. Loveless by Andrzej Zvyagintsev, which I think I listed in my honourable mentions. Phantom Thread, again, we've discussed it. Sorry to Bother You, which I didn't see.
I saw that.
Which is on current release right now at the time of speaking. I saw the trailer, and I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I have no idea what it's about. I mean, I do now because I read like a synopsis, but like watching the trailer, I was like, I have no idea.
I didn't watch the trailer, so I can't comment on that. But it's good. It's kind of like throughout the entire movie, it constantly feels like it's teetering on the edge of falling apart, and it doesn't. A lot of people would say that it does. I think it doesn't, and is really funny and satisfying and stylish and unique and ambitious.
Do you find it as a fellow hip hop fan who knows Boots Riley from The Coup, and as like a rapper, do you find it a little like unnerving or disconcerting to see like him reach like sort of widestream appeal, not as a rapper, like as a filmmaker? Not disconcerting, but like just a bit weird, like to see like people who otherwise like wouldn't give Boots Riley the time of day.
Not as weird as it was when they were on like
Letterman, was it?
Letterman and Bill Maher and whoever else it was when the cover art for their 2001 album Party Music depicted the World Trade Center being blown up.
And he was like,
it was released 3 weeks before that actually happened. And it's just a weird coincidence. But yeah, no, I mean, what's kind of weird to me is that they released the tie-in album for this film 6 years ago, and then they had to release another one this year. Yeah. None of the songs from the supposed soundtrack from 2012 actually make it into the movie. I was expecting them to play over the credits or something, but I don't think any of them do. But yeah, no, it's good. It's worth watching.
Two more that I had on my list. Well, three, but one was Walking to Paris, a Peter Greenaway film, which hasn't obviously even been premiered. The other one was The Square, which at this point last year had already won the Palme d'Or, obviously. I saw it, I liked it. It's maybe a bit overlong, and I find like most of Ruben Östlund's films kind of outstay their welcome. But this one's twisty, and it probes things, and it's funny, I guess, and you should definitely watch it if you find time. And the last one was Wonder Wheel. I don't know why I'm laughing when I said that, but Wonder Wheel, which I did see, and which I kind of enjoyed.
Why was that on your top 10?
Because it was coming out in like the next month, and I think Nick Pinkerton had been, ironically or otherwise, being like waxing lyrically about it, like in every other tweet. And so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch it to own the libs.
All right, so my 10 from last year, we've already spoken about 5 of them. So I had Annihilation, I had Halloween, I had You Were Never Really Here, I had Mandy, and I had the ultimately disappointing Hold the Dark. So 4 of my 10 actually didn't make it out this year. The only other one that did was Luca Guadagnino's Suspiria, which I enjoyed. My issue with it primarily was that the protagonist is really not the character played by Dakota Johnson. It's the character played by Mia Goth, who is the closest to the character played by Jessica Harper in the original. And the one who actually is kind of proactively going about investigating what's going on at the ballet academy. And it's kind of her story that I was gravitating toward, whereas the Dakota Johnson one is going in a very different direction, which is kind of interesting. The film has some incredible scenes, like really, really unforgettable scenes. And a B-plot with an old man that I thought was kind of initially interesting, but then
it disappears, though.
It doesn't disappear, but it becomes... It's just like 2 completely different things going on that aren't necessarily simpatico. So I don't know. I liked it. I liked it though overall.
I think most films starring or in which Tilda Swinton features outstay their welcome.
I did find it distracting that she's playing the old man in makeup. That was
Yeah, because like she can never disguise her voice. It's just obviously her.
Well, it's obviously somebody in heavy makeup at first.
Yeah.
Like I happened to know in advance that it was Tilda Swinton, but
sure.
Anyway, yeah. So the other 4 films were Dragged Across Concrete by S. Craig Zahler, which is coming out I think in April. Piercing by Nicholas Pesh, which did all of these films did premiere this year, but they haven't made it out yet. Piercing is out in February, in the US and on VOD. Still looking forward to that one. In Fabric by Peter Strickland, and Sunset by Laszlo Nemes.
I had a chance to see Piercing earlier this year. Forget the festival.
So did I, actually. Played at the Horror-thon.
What was your excuse?
I had work to do.
I got pissed.
So, all right, well, okay, so let's
I'm guessing
move on.
Those 4 that you've just listed there are on your most anticipated of 2019? Or have they
they are
downgraded? Yeah?
No, there are at least 3 of them are. Let me just...
Right.
Have you got a list, yeah?
Yeah. So again, I have 10 plus 1.
You're a bit of a renegade, aren't you?
Well, it's my end of year energy, isn't it? I'm just offloading all of the pent up self-restraint. The plus 1 is listed on IMDb as pre-production, but the director has a track record of knocking these things out. But we'll get to that when we do. Again, I must say you've forced me into mustering some kind of excitement for upcoming releases. I must say I don't really get excited for films until I'm sitting in the cinema to watch them, with the exception maybe of one of the following 10 films that I'm going to list.
But do you not hear that? When you hear that a director whose films you have liked, is working on material that sounds appealing to you, do you not go, "Well, that sounds great"?
I used to, maybe, but they're always it's always fucking a year or 2 before they even
I'm not saying that you exist in a state of feverish excitement for the 2-year period, but I'm just saying they're on your radar and they sound good to you. That's what I mean.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to sort of offset any sort of imagined enthusiasm on my part here. With the idea that
So you're gonna watch these films, but you're not happy about it.
These 10 could just change tomorrow,
Yeah, of course.
And I don't keep tabs like you do of things that are in production that I've got, whatever. I'm just what's coming up. I get excited when I'm going to a festival as attending, as a accredited press. And then that festival reveals its competition lineup or, lineup in general. And amidst that lineup, there will be a Terrence Malick film or, any film by a director who I like.
Did you just reveal what one of your picks for 2019 is?
Also, one of these I didn't even know was a thing until I saw it on your list. And I was like, oh, that sounds really good.
Yeah, but see, that's what I mean. That's the reaction.
But I'm seeing it with a complete deadpan face, like I'm in a Roy Anderson film.
Did you just reveal another one of your picks there?
No. When a filmmaker says they're retiring, I make sure they do by never watching any of their subsequent films when they come out of their so-called retirement. If you make your fucking bed, you have to lie in it, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Well, do you want to give me I don't know? Let's go through them in alphabetical order. Right.
What am I giving you? My first 5?
Yeah, go ahead.
Avengers Endgame.
Okay.
We didn't discuss Infinity War at all on this episode.
Yeah.
It's a film that I was very excited watching when I was watching it as I was in the cinema. And then obviously in the hour or so after, realised that, again, this is a spoiler for Avengers Infinity War, realised that they were going to find a way, Marvel and Disney, to resurrect the characters who they just offed because they're commercial properties and therefore very profitable.
Right, yeah. I mean, they already had films scheduled to come out with those characters.
Exactly, right. So it's going to be interesting to see how they negotiate that.
We did. We reviewed Infinity War in an hour and a half review will be re-released next year at some point.
Second one is one of yours, Dragged Across Concrete, which I can't wait to see. Being mixed to negative reviews, I would say, mostly, from what I've gathered. Third one is Hobbs and Shaw.
Okay. The Fast and Furious spin-off.
Yeah. One of the great things I've liked...
so incensed Tyrese Gibson. Pushed back Fast and Furious 9.
One of the great things about the Fast and Furious franchise is how antagonisms gradually or quickly become, camaraderie.
Yeah.
And there's this tension between Hobbs and Shaw that it turns out to be the sort of funnest thing about the last Fast and Furious film, I think. So it'll be interesting to see how they work as a sort of standalone pair. The Irishman is probably was the one film that I had in mind when I said, yeah, with the exception of one film, I don't really get that excited about new films. Obviously, The Irishman has Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, directed by Martin Scorsese.
Joe Pesci.
It's like Joe Pesci, Man on Fire.
Yeah, it's hard to go wrong. It's you would hope. The only thing that I was wondering is Scorsese's films have been getting very, very long recently, and one of the often discussed issues with a lot of Netflix originals is that Netflix don't really seem to care about running times. So is Scorsese just going to be cut loose? Like, how long is The Irishman going to be? Because the budget is huge as well.
That's true. I mean, he's not going to make a film with De Niro, Pacino, and Pesci like less than fucking 2 hours, is he?
I'd be surprised. I'd be surprised if it's less than 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think could see this easily being his longest film.
Oh yeah.
Because I think there's an awareness on everyone's part involved in the film that this is somewhat of a career capper in some way, that it's like getting the band back together, and
yes.
Not only is it Scorsese working with Pesci and De Niro for the first time since 1995, Harvey Keitel is in it, isn't he?
Is he? Right. I don't know. I'm not that enthusiastic about it, to be honest.
About Harvey Keitel?
No, about the film, I'm not enthusiastic enough about it enough to know who's in it, other than those three.
Oh.
But yeah,
I think he is. Yeah. Harvey Keitel. You got working with Harvey Keitel for the first time since The Last Temptation of Christ, right? And coming back to the gangster genre for the first time. I mean, I suppose The Departed, but like it's sort of like his wheelhouse, and so yeah, I'd be surprised if it's not pretty epic just in terms of sheer duration.
But because of all of that, it could also be really, really terrible.
I mean, it's not going to be terrible because Scorsese's never made a terrible film, and there's no reason to think that he would now. But okay, was that those were your five? Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. No, and my fifth one is Nosferatu by David Lee Fisher, which is one that I wasn't aware of. Like, I wasn't aware that David Lee Fisher had remade or like reversioned Dr. Caligari. Remixed.
Yeah.
Is that?
So that was supposed to come out years ago. It just keeps getting pushed back, and it was crowdfunded. And if you go on their Facebook page, it's a lot of people kind of asking like for updates and like, what have you done with my money? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of mildly curious about that, but
right.
Okay, all right. So the first one on my list is Ad Astra, directed by James Gray, which is coming out in May. It was originally supposed to come out in January, and he said there was no way that they were going to make that because they still have so much visual effects to finish, and he's still skeptical that they can even make May. But Army Corps engineer Roy McBride, played by Brad Pitt, embarks on a mission across the galaxy to discover the truth about his father, who disappeared in space 20 years ago while searching for signs of alien life. Though he was once presumed dead, new evidence suggests Roy's father may still be alive, hiding within an abandoned power plant on a distant planet, and that he could potentially pose a dangerous threat to the entire universe. Mm-hmm. So, James Gray, outer space sci-fi film. Yes, please. My second one is Crawl, the new film by Alexandre Aja, While struggling to save her father during a Category 5 hurricane, a young woman finds herself trapped inside a flooding house and fighting for her life against Florida's most savage and feared predators, those being alligators. Aja has referred to this as kind of like going back to the basics after going down kind of like non-horror routes with like Horns and The Ninth Life of Louis Drax. This is supposed to be kind of bringing it back to like high tension, The Hills Have Eyes, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So very much looking forward to that, and I love movies about alligators eating people. Number 3 here, and these are not ranked, these are just in alphabetical order. Third one is Dragged Across Concrete. For anybody who does not know what that is, 2 policemen, one an old-timer, the other his volatile younger partner, find themselves suspended when a video of their strong-arm tactics becomes the media's cause du jour. Low on cash and with no other options, these 2 embittered soldiers descend into the criminal underworld to gain their just due, but instead find far more than they wanted awaiting them in the shadows. Bone Tomahawk was amazing. Brawl in Cell Block 99 was amazing. Dragged Across Concrete is amazing.
Have you read any of his prose?
No, I'm gonna, except for his IMDb reviews. No, I'm gonna.
And his Amazon reviews.
Yeah. I'm gonna probably read one of his westerns, maybe Rates of the Broken Land.
Right.
I'd actually love that he has an unproduced screenplay called The Brigands of Rattleborge, or Borg, which is supposed to be amazing. Anyway, number 4 here is Glass, the new M. Night Shyamalan film.
I didn't see Split.
You've seen Unbreakable, though, haven't you?
Yes, I like.
Following the conclusion of Split, Glass finds David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis, pursuing Kevin Wendell Crumb, played by James McAvoy. Kevin Wendell Crumb's superhuman figure of the Beast, in a series of escalating encounters, while the shadowy presence of Elijah Price, played by Samuel L. Jackson, emerges as an orchestrator who holds secrets critical to both men. Such an interesting film in just in terms of like what it is, because like nobody at first knew that Split was a sort of not so much sequel, but in the same universe as Unbreakable, because Unbreakable at the time was like, oh, it's the first film in a trilogy and all this kind of stuff, and then it underperformed, but it was so ahead of its time. Like if Unbreakable had come out 10 years later, it would have been seen as this like really clever commentary on like the same, like 10 years later would have been 2010, the same year that Super came out, the same year that Kick-Ass came out, and it would have been seen. It would have been the year after Watchmen came out. It was like that kind of deconstruction of the superhero genre and the various tropes and stuff. But it was the same year that X-Men came out instead. So it was like this weird movie about comic book lore that just didn't connect. I always liked it a lot, and it's always been my favorite Shyamalan film. I enjoyed Split, so I'm really looking forward to this. Next one is from last year's list as well. Didn't make it out in time, and I was kind of skeptical that it would, but I put it on there. And that is Peter Strickland's In Fabric. Set against the backdrop of a busy winter sales period in a department store, In Fabric follows a cursed dress as it passes from person to person with devastating consequences. So that's got really good reviews.
Yeah, it has been.
And I fucking loved The Duke of Burgundy, so I can't wait to see this.
Did you like Cattle and Varga?
I did like Cattle and Varga, yeah.
I need to rewatch both of those.
I need to rewatch Barbarian Sound Studio.
Oh yeah,
that one left me a little bit not underwhelmed, but a little bit dissatisfied with the way that it went. It felt kind of like a predictable trajectory for me. Beautiful, like stylistically and everything. The sound design was amazing, and I love the premise. But I don't know. I need to see it again. Next one up is The Irishman, which I didn't read the synopsis there.
No, I didn't. I don't do synopses.
Because you're indifferent to what the camera is pointing at. More just the fact that it is pointing.
I just like shapes and colours.
Yeah.
Maybe sounds.
The Irishman. Well, okay, a mob hitman recalls his possible involvement with the slaying of Jimmy Hoffa. Yeah, I mean, it's just fucking mob stuff. But
yeah, it sounds class.
Doesn't it? Alright, so give me your next 5 there.
Okay, so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino.
Sorry, I just gave you 6 there. Never mind. But
did you?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I actually have a +1 as well at the end of this 5, so I'm going to give you 6 now. And the +1 at the end, I'm not sure it's going to be released, but or even premiere. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Tarantino is. Do you want to read? You got synopses ready for all of these?
I'm just on my list here.
Obviously, it's Tarantino's take on the Manson family murders, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, and Margot Robbie, which in many ways just seems like a departure for Tarantino.
And yet a return to the LA setting and of Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs. A faded TV actor and his stunt double embark on an odyssey to make a name for themselves in the film industry during the helter-skelter reign of terror in 1969 Los Angeles.
So I have no idea really as to how sort of closely it's going to follow, like, people who we know. You know, it's got Damian Lewis as Steve McQueen. Margot Robbie's obviously playing Sharon Tate. I don't know Cliff Booth or Rick Dalton. But it makes sense that they're the two characters through whose lens we sort of view events, because Tarantino, you know, being Tarantino, can sort of, you know, he's not burdened by like making protagonists of people who are familiar to the general public.
Well, apparently they live next door to Sharon Tate, those two characters. So that's how they'll figure it. And it was originally scheduled to come out on the 50th anniversary of the murders until that was decried as tasteless.
Yes.
So it was moved a couple of weeks up, but I would imagine it figures in. The question for me isn't so much how prominent it'll be in the story, but whether it'll be revised the way that the end of World War II was in Inglourious Bastards. Does Sharon Tate survive in this version or something like that? I don't know.
Yeah, she enacts her deadly revenge and gets her sweet satisfaction.
There's somebody in it playing Roman Polanski as well.
Who's playing Polanski?
Oh, I can't remember.
Rafael Zafiaruka.
Right, I don't know.
All right. Anyway, so next up is Radegund by Terrence Malick.
Yeah.
Which I should have had on my last year's list if you'd
looked past April.
If I'd looked past April and if I had any sort of investment in future releases, which is fair to say at this point that I do not.
Yeah. I mean, you never know. You might be dead by then.
I might be dead by then.
So
live in the moment.
Yeah.
What we should do, really, what we should have done is just release the top 10 films. Review the top 10 films on current release. Because like once they're out of theaters, I just like lose all interest or memory of them. So yeah, Radegund is Terrence Malick's upcoming historical drama, which follows the Austrian Franz Jagerstatter, a conscientious objector who refuses to fight for the Third Reich in World War II and is executed by them in 1943. That sounds a little bit spoilerish as plots go. But,
I mean, I suppose it is historical.
Yeah.
But
Radegund, this is off Wikipedia. Radegund will have a more structured narrative than Malick's previous works, according to a filmmaker who stated, "Lately, I keep insisting, only very lately, have I been working without a script, and I've lately repented the idea. The last picture we shot and we're now cutting went back to a script that was very well ordered." Good. That's
as you know, I've run increasingly cold on his last couple of movies, but
you have,
we discussed. There was a strong disagreement on last year's episode about Song to Song.
A very strong disagreement. My number one of the year.
Your number one of the year.
And you give it 1 out of 10.
2 out of 10. 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to this. I mean, you know, because I don't know what a Terrence Malick film with a structured script, and not only a structured script, but because I mean, you know, like there's a certain degree of structure. Like when we spoke about Song to Song, I said that the shift to contemporary settings had been sort of conducive to that kind of experimental, sort of quasi-documentary sort of approach to storytelling, because there wasn't the same demand in terms of production design and set dressing and things like that and costumes. So, you know, because all of his films prior to The Wonder were period films. And this is also a period film, but it's, I don't know, like this is also historical. This is also like a biography of an actual person. So it sounds fascinating for all of those reasons. Okay, next up is Ben Wheatley's adaptation of Rebecca. That's a long shot.
Well, he shoots in spring.
Yeah,
and he has a habit,
and it's gone to Netflix, which makes it a possibility of like premiering at one of the autumn festivals and going to Netflix.
I would say New York and TIFF. Yeah. Because you know Wheatley knocks them out. I watched Happy New Year Colin Burstead at the cinema recently, and he was there for a Q&A afterwards with his producer.
Was that in contention for consideration for your list? You didn't like it enough, though, did you?
I said I would avoid scores on this episode, but I give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, it's airing on BBC Two on the 30th of December, so
yeah,
it's really. I should have said actually at the start of this episode in terms of films that I haven't had a chance to see yet. That's one, and Bumblebee, which I think looks really good and is getting good reviews, is also that's out on the 26th. So
so he said in the Q&A after the screening that, you know, the reason why he's sort of been able to make as many films as he has is because he's not waiting fucking 6-7 years to get each one funded. Like, that's why, like, there's no, like, logical, like, progression in terms of scale from one of his productions to the next. And it was really interesting to hear him say that because, like, you know, obviously, like, you know, directors, the way sort of they're thought about in terms of careers these days, it's like you make a few films, you break through, and then each film has to get bigger.
Yeah,
and probably,
or at least
longer.
At least when you get to, because I remember saying this about like Guillermo del Toro as well, where it's like there's a sense of, oh, I've reached, or Peter Jackson is another good example of a sense of like I've reached this level, and it wouldn't, and I mean I'm sure they have people around them telling them that this is the case, but it wouldn't be a good idea to go back to doing a small film. But yeah, I've read interviews with Ben Wheatley where he talks about having his various scripts and his various projects in development. He divides them into 3, I think he said, different.
I think like Winterbottom's similar as well.
Yeah, Winterbottom would be similar, I think, as well. Where it's just like, well, I've got like things that I can do for basically nothing. Something like A Field in England.
Yeah.
Or Happy New Year, Colin Burke.
Yeah,
Happy New Year. Like, he was supposed to make a film called Freak Shift with Alicia Vikander and Armie Hammer last year, and the funding fell through. But he's been trying to make that movie since. I remember searching his Twitter history for the word Freak Shift, and the earliest mention of it, I think, was in like January 2011. So before even Kill List was released. So this is a project that he's had, but it's like a $30 million budget or something like that. So it's just something that is going to take a while to get off the ground. But yeah, like you said, he doesn't wait around. Freak Shift falls apart, and he just goes, okay, I'll make a movie for fuck all. And
he says it's because he loves to make films. And if he waited 6 to 7 years for feature, you know, he said directing for him is a practice thing. It's you know, it requires habit and it requires regularity and a routine like any other job. And I think it's a fascinating and admirable approach.
Yeah, like Brian De Palma said that as well when he was, well, actually, it was quite recently, but you know, he was talking about when he was more prolific, because he was prolific, and when he was he's semi-retired at this point. But he was saying, you know, like directors don't get better just sitting around waiting for funding or sitting around in their trailers. You know, like you have to actually do the job.
Yeah. So yeah, to come to Rebecca, obviously it's very different to Ben Wheatley's other stuff. His second literary adaptation, maybe after High Rise. Am I right in thinking?
Yes.
And obviously it's not only a literary adaptation, but it's one that's already been made into an iconic film, which has a kind of a huge pressure on this film. Although, like, I'm not really particularly all that. I think Rebecca's a great film, Hitchcock's Rebecca, but I'm not like overly fond of it. And I have no, you know, precious relationship to the originating material. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see what he does with that, and I think we should definitely do an episode on Wheatley very soon of the Journeymen. Next up, and I say this having just attended a wedding with the director, if I may say, is Relaxer by Joel Petrakis.
Oh yeah,
whose previous film Buzzard, I really liked.
Did you see the film he made after Buzzard, the Alchemist Cookbook?
No, and I didn't see Ape either.
I've looked for Ape. I haven't been able to find it.
But yeah, a talent to watch, let's say.
Yeah, Buzzard was great. I really like Buzzard. Made my top 10 of that year.
Right.
Is that all? Is that your 10?
No. I've still got one more to come, my friend, and then plus the one that is probably a long shot. But next up is The Souvenir, which is Joanna Hogg's next and fourth feature, which premieres at Sundance next month. Can't wait for a new one. Can't wait for a new.
Where did you get that information? I don't think that's on my list.
Well, it won't be on your list because you're not keeping up to date with British auteurs. Yeah, no, it's Sundance have released their partial program, if not the full lineup, and Joanna Hoggs will be as part of it. Um, yeah, it's I understand it to be a very autobiographical work about I think a film student negotiating um romantic travails. That might be completely misremembering what the film's about. But yeah, I mean, I love Hogg's work. I thought Archipelago is one of the best films of this current decade. I thought Exhibition, although strong, was an interesting film. Like, it's a sort of, you felt like it was going to be a film that became regarded as sort of like a transitional work. But yeah, I mean, are you a fan of Hogg's work?
I've only seen Archipelago and I liked it.
Right.
I certainly wouldn't go as far as you just have there, but
yeah, you should definitely see Unrelated as well, which feels in many ways like, a sort of dress rehearsal. Although, it exists on its own terms, but it feels like a dress rehearsal in many ways for Archipelago. And then my sort of 11th film of this 10 most anticipated, because I'm so into the anticipatory mood now, is Denis Villeneuve's Dune.
That's not coming out next year.
Well, you don't know that.
It only starts shooting next year.
Yeah, it's in pre-production, but he knocks them out. He's another one who just knocks them out.
There's no way. That's a big movie. It'll be scheduled way in advance. That's a 2020. Was that your long shot?
Yeah.
Oh, well then, yeah, sure it is. But there's no chance of that. But yeah, that's going to be great.
Love it if it just dropped.
Drop tomorrow. Like a mixtape.
Just like, surprise!
Okay, right. So I've only got 4 left on my list. This one, and I think this might be my number 1 film that I'm looking forward to next year, and that is The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers.
Oh, yeah.
So I absolutely love The Witch. I think The Witch is amazing. This one is... when you mentioned Nosferatu earlier, I thought you were referring to Robert Eggers' adaptation of Nosferatu, which was supposed to be his follow-up to The Witch, but has been pushed back. And the film he made instead is The Lighthouse, which on Letterboxd it just says the story of an aging lighthouse keeper named Old, who lives in early 20th century Maine. He's played by Willem Dafoe, and Robert Pattinson is also in it. But it's been shot in black and white, and it's apparently set in the world of old seafaring myths, and it's being referred to as a fantasy horror film. So that just sounds amazing. I can't wait to see that.
Sounds up your creek.
Yeah. I was disappointed to not see it in the Sundance lineup, though, because that puts in question then whether it's where it may be South by Southwest it could go to, but if it misses that, it's probably one of the autumn festivals, and then in that case it's a 2020 general release, most likely. So I was because The Witch premiered at Sundance, and I expected Lighthouse to go to Sundance, but maybe South by Southwest, I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, and then I also have Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, really looking forward to that. And then I've got Sunset by Laszlo Nemes, which was on my list last year. Also getting very good reviews, not quite as good as Son of Saul. It has won awards, though. Didn't he win Best Director at one of the festivals for this?
I think he's also been given a Freshki Award at one festival as well.
And it's also Hungary's submission for Best Foreign Film, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm like Son of Saul is incredible. This one,
I've still yet to see it. I really want to, though.
Set in Budapest in 1913, when the city was considered to be at the heart of Europe, the drama follows 20-year-old Irish Later, no idea if that's the correct pronunciation, who arrives in the Hungarian capital after spending her younger years in an orphanage, hoping to work as a milliner in the legendary hat store that belonged to her late parents. She is suddenly confronted with her past and starts searching for answers about her family before stumbling upon dark secrets. So it's been described as kind of like a thriller sort of thing, but Son of Saul kind of has a thriller component as well that I thought was just extremely effective. So yeah, I can't wait to see that. And the last one on my official top 10 is Jordan Peele's follow-up to Get Out, Us, which is coming out in March. A mother and a father.
Sorry.
The synopsis. So yeah, the synopsis was just sort of revealed, and it's something to do with doppelgangers. So like the intruders who turn up at the house are the people in the house. doppelgangers, right? So a mother and father take their kids to the beach house expecting to unplug and unwind with friends, but as night descends, their serenity turns to tension and chaos when some shocking visitors arrive uninvited. And apparently this is more horror than Get Out. So, yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Yeah, it
and
sounds
then
good.
my honourable mention is Piercing, because I'm still looking forward to that.
Right.
So yeah, okay, so then my 10 were Ad Astra, Crawl, Dragged Across Concrete, Glass, In Fabric, The Irishman, The Lighthouse, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Sunset, and Us.
Not one freaking mention for Avengers, for Fast and Furious, for Star Wars.
Did you have Star Wars on yours?
No. But only because I thought you would. I thought, between the two of us, we could hit all the franchises.
Well, let's do what we did last year here. Hang on a sec. I'm just going to give you some of the huge films that are coming out.
Okay, the huge ones. Yeah.
You tell me if not if you're excited, but how excited you are.
Okay.
Alita: Battle Angel by Robert
What's that?
Rodriguez and James Cameron, about the cyborg. No.
What? So that's like a co-director's credit?
No, written and produced by Cameron.
Oh.
Captain Marvel.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, it exists to introduce the character before Endgame.
Before she
right?
shows up and saves the day in Endgame.
Yeah, which I can't wait for. But like, I don't know. I saw the trailer. It looked okay.
The trailer doesn't do it much favors, I think. It's a bit underwhelming, isn't it? Chaos Walking, the new Doug Liman movie. In Prentice Town, Todd has been brought up to believe that the spackle released a germ that killed all the women and unleashed noise on the remaining men. After discovering a patch of silence out in the swamp, his surrogate parents immediately tell him that he has to run, leaving him with only a map of New World, a message, and many unanswered questions. It sounds like YA stuff to me. I think it is.
Yeah, it's based on YA novels, isn't it?
Oh, yeah,
like Tom Holland, Daisy Ridley. Nah.
Yeah.
Can't stand either of them.
Tim Burton's Dumbo?
Nah.
No.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah. Shazam.
Oh, yeah, what's Shazam again?
The new DC one by David Sandberg, who directed Lights Out and Annabelle Creation. It's a real sort of jokey comic thing about a kid who turns into a superhero.
And the character's new, right? Like, I mean, in terms of like the DC extended universe.
Yeah,
we haven't seen him yet before.
No.
Yeah. No.
You're still going to see them all.
Oh yeah, I'll be seeing all of them. I'll be like sitting there, fucking stony faced. I hate cinema, but I love hating it.
Yeah. Hellboy, the new Hellboy. Did you see the new trailer?
I haven't seen either of the other Hellboys, so I have no real investment in the character or attachment to it.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll make a point of watching the other two films, right?
Mm.
And then this one's a sequel. It's not.
No,
like
it's not. It's a complete reboot or a complete reset. Yeah.
All right.
It looks
another fucking franchise I need to catch up with.
You said Avengers Endgame. I mean, I'm curious to see it. Obviously, I'll watch it. I didn't like Infinity War.
Honestly, man, I'm so psyched. So
Would you say that's your most anticipated of next year?
It's between that and The Irishman.
Right. Neither of which you're actually excited for.
Yeah, I mean, when I say excited, I mean, air quotes.
Yeah. John Wick 3.
Haven't seen John Wick or John Wick 2.
I like John Wick. I wasn't fond of John Wick 2. Guy Ritchie's Aladdin.
You've seen the artwork for it now.
No,
the art. God.
You mean the stills of Will Smith?
Yeah.
I mean,
absolutely class.
I mean, isn't it a weird match of director and material?
Yeah,
very weird. That's gonna suck. I would say Brightburn. You know
what's that?
It's the one with it's the James Gunn produced superhero horror movie that basically it's like unofficially speculating what if Superman was evil, what if Superman was like a serial killer basically. The trailer looks pretty fun. Godzilla King of the Monsters.
Is that like what's that?
It's a sequel to? It's a sequel to the 2014 Gareth Edwards one.
Right, which I did see.
Yeah,
yes.
and also set in the same universe as Kong Skull Island and leading into Godzilla vs. Kong in 2020.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So what, was Kong Skull Island conceived and made with this in mind.
Yeah. There's all sorts of like Easter eggs and stuff at the end with like.
Oh really?
Yeah, there's an organization in it called Monarch.
But like, Kong's bigger than Godzilla's bigger than Kong.
Yes, although the Kong in Kong Skull Island is way bigger than the Kong in any of the previous Kongs.
Really?
Except maybe in the Toho Godzilla vs Kong films.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know. I think I prefer Kong to Godzilla as like a world and character.
Yeah, I probably do as well. Yeah.
I reviewed that 2014 Godzilla for BBC Radio, and I remember just saying like, I don't know like if he's meant to be a goodie or a baddie, or a good lizard or a bad. Like live on air, because like I came out feeling really sort of confused by its like ambiguity, because I went to see it as the professional critic I am without having actually seen any other incarnation of Godzilla.
Have you not seen the original?
Nah, I have since, but I hadn't at that point, and I was like, is there meant to be like this sort of, are we meant to feel this ambivalence towards him as like a force that like corrects like social or planetary wrong?
In the originals, he's obviously just like a metaphor, not just, but he is a metaphor for, you know, the atomic bomb, and he's like a force of nature, and it's supposed to be terrifying. And then they made the sequel, and then there was a big gap, and then the next movie was Godzilla vs Kong.
Yeah,
in like 1962, right. And from that point on, it was like Godzilla pitted against other monsters who were worse than him. So he does become this kind of anti-hero. But what's kind of cool about this shared universe is that there is a different director, and it seems like there's on each film, and there seems to be no mandate to like conform to any kind of style. Like Gareth Edwards' Godzilla and Jordan Vogt Roberts' Kong Skull Island couldn't be more different tonally, stylistically. And Michael Dougherty from Trick or Treat and Krampus is directing this one, and then Adam Wingard is directing Godzilla vs Kong. So it's kind of interesting. I haven't been particularly enthusiastic about either of the films so far.
But am I right to recall, in the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, like everyone at the end just like cheering him on?
Yeah, because he kills those other two creatures.
That's right, yeah.
The Mutos or whatever.
Yeah. And they're like, "Way, Godzilla, woo!"
Okay, so moving on to the new X-Men, Dark Phoenix. It's gonna stink.
Again, it's like my interest. I mean, if you'd asked me last year, at the beginning of last year, Avengers Infinity War, I would have been like, man, what's that? Having then obviously watched like 18 of those films
in 5 days.
In 5 days, in order to give Avengers Infinity War some sort of purpose, I inevitably was more invested in it than I would have been. Same really goes for X-Men, so I've got loads of different X-Men films to catch up on.
Same goes for Fast and Furious as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I wouldn't have high hopes for this one. It's been pushed back a number of times. Did you see the new Men in Black trailer with Chris Hemsworth?
I didn't see the trailer for it. I mean, I think they make a good pair and a good match for a reboot of that or a sequel to that. I think it's set in the same universe. I'm not sure about that though.
I think the first Men in Black is great, and the two sequels are terrible.
But I think Liam Neeson fucking sinks everything he's in,
except for Meal Ticket and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yes,
and any of the films where he's just killing people.
Yeah, but like in Widows earlier this year, maybe I should have said Widows is an overrated film.
Sure, I liked it.
Yeah, just, oh my god, those shots of Liam Neeson. That opening shot in Widows, when he's just like necking on with what's her name, Viola Davis, and he's just like fucking swallowing her face. Like, do you think was he trying to make her laugh, do you think? Is that just how he kisses?
I can't think of any other film that I've seen Liam Neeson kissing in.
Well, now we know why.
Toy Story 4?
Like I was happy and content with the third one being like this.
But are you outraged that they're making a fourth one?
I'm not outraged,
disgusted.
But it's like,
are you going to leave a half-star review on Letterboxd saying "fuck this shit" or whatever?
What do you think?
I mean, I don't see any reason. Like, I mean, it's not like Toy Story was planned as a trilogy. You know, I don't see why you can't make a fourth one.
When the third one was released, they were like, this is the definitive end, didn't they?
Did they? I don't know.
Did they? I don't know.
But I mean, they immediately started making like short film spin-off sequels that are set after Toy Story 3 with those characters. So anyway, I'm looking forward to it. I like the Toy Story films. I don't get excited about animated films generally, but Toy Story, and I mean, I skipped Incredibles 2 this year. I skipped Wreck-It Ralph 2. I didn't see Coco either. I've kind of just tapped out on Pixar and Disney animation stuff. After 2016, when everybody loved Zootopia, and I was like,
I saw Coco. It was okay, pretty good, visually anyway. And I saw Incredibles 2, which was like, okay.
Yeah. Spider-Man: Far From Home.
Homecoming was one of the worst films so far, I think, of the Marvel franchise, and it's inevitably going to compare unfavorably, I think, to Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, isn't it?
Definitely.
Like if they have a better villain than the last one, like Michael Keaton in Homecoming was just like, whatever.
I thought he was one of the better things about it.
But like his relationship to Spider-Man,
that was a bit thin. But I mean, the whole thing was gutted of like the dramatic content of Spider-Man as a premise. You know, there was no Uncle Ben. There was like the whole thing was just about Spider-Man wanting to be an Avenger, which is just like, I don't care.
Yeah,
like,
what I would like to
presumes
see
a kind of an investment in the shared universe that I think is I don't know, like increasingly unstable going forward. Like the more films there are, the less you can rely on the fact that everybody has seen them all and loves them.
And I think like the likes of Ant-Man are showing that it's possible to make them without any sort of tie-ins, and like the likes of Thor Ragnarok as well. But like talk about good scenes and bad films. One thing I did like in Spider-Man: Homecoming was that the rescue sequence in Washington.
That was definitely the best action sequence here.
And
but the action sequences in general were kind of weak in that, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay, the quote unquote live action Lion King.
I mean, what I've seen of it looks totally like dreadful.
It looks terrible, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
it really
like,
does.
And this whole question of like, is it live action or is it animation, has to be one of the dumbest conversations that like has happened in film culture in a long time. Like, the arguments are like, oh yeah, but it looks live action, and if it looks live action, I'm going to call it live action, which is like saying, oh yeah, well that painting looks photorealistic, so I'm going to call it a photograph. Like, they're fundamentally different, like, techniques. Yeah. And it's diminishing of the work of the animators to call it live action in the first place.
Of course, yeah.
But it looks, I can't tell the difference. Like, it doesn't look real at all.
Like, their eyes, like, they haven't got animals' eyes.
No. And I mean, like
they're emoting with their eyes, these lions.
I mean, are they going to make them sing and dance? I just don't understand, like, why it works so beautifully as animation. Why do you want to see it in like this kind of like dead CGI kind of style?
Yeah.
Like, what's the appeal of a photorealistic lion singing "I just can't wait to be king" or fucking whatever?
I agree.
You had Hobbs and Shaw on your list. The New Mutants, which is another X-Men movie that just keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
Yeah.
It Chapter 2. I'm quite looking forward to It Chapter 2. I'm pretty curious to see. Gemini Man, which was, I believe, a Tony Scott film that we mentioned that Ang Lee has now directed. It was a Tony Scott project that didn't get made.
What is it?
Will Smith, where he's like
as the genie.
No, an aging assassin who tries to get out of the business but finds himself in the ultimate battle fighting his own clone who's 25 years younger than him and at the peak of his abilities. Sounds a bit like that Arnold Schwarzenegger film, The Sixth Day.
Oh yeah.
What about the new Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix?
I saw it on your list of upcomings.
It's hard to care, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd much rather just see Joaquin Phoenix's talents deployed elsewhere in like a film.
It's an interesting experiment though, because like you have to assume that the long contracts that come with these shared universes are part of what's keeping a lot of great actors out of them.
Yeah.
And the ability to just do standalone films, that might change. If this is a huge success, that might change those things.
Yeah.
The new Terminator movie.
So again, like, you know, I haven't seen a Terminator film since Judgment Day.
But this one ignores everything since Judgment Day. And Linda Hamilton comes back.
So it's like Halloween.
Yeah. And it's the first one that James Cameron's been involved with since Judgment Day.
How did like, why would you want to dismiss Judgment Day?
No, you don't.
Okay.
Everything since Judgment Day.
Well, I don't know how, you know, the other ones have like retconned or reshaped the universe.
But they're being ignored though.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know what's being ignored.
Oh, okay, but like, how would you feel about so forget about 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
How would you feel about
very excited.
28 years later sequel to Judgment Day? Yeah.
Very excited, yeah. Is
I
it
mean,
going to
I
have
find it
Robert
hard.
Patrick in it?
No, but Schwarzenegger's in it. I find it hard to get excited because the Terminator series is like one of the only film series that I rank the films in chronological order. They've just gotten worse and worse and worse and worse. And Terminator Genesis was unwatchable. And like 3, 4, and 5 have been, each one has been supposedly the first film in a trilogy, but they've all been so badly received that the trilogies all just are completely stillborn and they have to start again in a couple of years. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, I'm curious, but I mean, like, I wouldn't get my hopes up. All right, let's skip over a few of these. Jumanji 3.
You know, I had Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, down as one of my most surprisingly good films of this year, but then realised it was actually released in like the last 2 weeks of 2017, and I saw it just
released
in
around the same time
January.
as Star Wars.
Yeah, it was one of the first films I saw with my newly acquired Cineworld Unlimited card, which I got, by the way, I should say, because if I got a gym subscription, I'd get bored. Like, exercise bores me. Whereas if I get a Cineworld card, I can walk to and from the cinema like at least 5 times a week and get my exercise that way. So, to answer your question, I am very much on board for another Jumanji film. Is it going to be the same on-screen personnel? Yeah. No, I liked them. I liked, everyone involved in that. Good film. 8 out of 10.
I wasn't that pushed about it. Star Wars Episode 9.
After the misstep that was Solo.
And The Last Jedi.
Was that a misstep?
I preferred Solo to The Last Jedi.
Really? No, I thought Solo was, like, redundant. Yeah, I have to say I'm excited for it. Because there's a certain... I don't know, like, the Star Wars franchise so far has been a lot more consistent in quality than, let's say, the Marvel films.
Yeah, probably. Well, I don't know about that. They're all sort of in the same range for me, like 5, 6 out of 10.
Right. But yeah, I mean, like the sort of built-in iconography of Star Wars and the historical longevity of it adds a certain prestige, I suppose.
Yeah. We should say we also did an hour-long review of The Last Jedi.
We did.
That we will be re-releasing next year.
Yes.
All right, well, that's about it, really, for this episode, I think, and for this year.
Okay, so that wraps up our Year in Review 2018 episode. You've been listening to The Journeymen. My name's Michael Pattison. I've been here with my co-host,
Bobby Lowe.
Follow us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, and YouTube. And we should say at the very end of this episode, take this opportunity to wish you all a Happy New Year. And we will see you. We're going to take a short hiatus, and we'll see you again, or you will hear us again on the 14th of January 2019, where we will have our first of several episodes dedicated to
Francis Ford Coppola. So, looking forward to that one. Yeah, he's going to be a really interesting director to cover, because even though he has, it's maybe arguable to say that he's underrated, I do think it's fair to say that the majority of his filmography is overlooked. That he has certain films, like his 70s output, the 4 films that he released in the 70s, are all sort of like canonical classics. And then he has the 2 kind of divisive ones, Godfather 3 and Dracula, but everything else is kind of lost in the shuffle, it seems.
Yes.
I mean, I know that with the exception of Youth Without Youth, those 6 are the only ones I've seen. So I'm really curious to check out his kind of less well-known films.
Yeah, me too. I've seen Dementia 13.
Right.
And Youth Without Youth. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, and please leave comments or rate or like or subscribe or retweet, or if you enjoy the show, please do that a little bit to support it. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.